Chapter 1105. 1105. If Lu Shaoqing can do it, so can I. This kick was as fast as lightning. Before the other party could react, Lu Ming had already kicked him in the stomach. He flew out screaming and lined up with the other two people before him. He lay there looking like a dog eating shit. Oh, you bastard. You're dead. The elder of the Heavenly Sword faction and Wu Chongkong and Wu Tsong are here. They're not far away. The news will spread soon. You're dead. One of the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword faction shouted and threatened Lu Ming. Bang! Lu Ming strode over and left a footprint on his face, causing his face to rub against the ground. Wu Chongkong and Wu Tsong? They were killed by Lu Shaoqing in the secret realm of the Saint Mansion. If not for the Destiny Talisman, they would have died long ago. I'll wait here for these two pieces of trash to come. If Lu Shaoqing can kill them, I can kill them too. Lu Ming lowered his head and looked down at the three disciples of the Sky Martial Sword faction. His cold voice spread throughout the entire area. Everyone was stunned. This commander was too awesome. He was actually waiting for Wu Chongkong and Wu Tsong to kill the elites like Lu Shaoqing. Lu Shaoqing was a peerless heaven's favorite, an existence comparable to the five magnates. How could you, the law enforcement army, compare to him? However, he had to admire Lu Ming's courage. Lu Ming stepped on the face of the disciple of the Sky Martial Sword faction and waited. The other two disciples of the Sky Martial Sword faction lay there, not daring to say a word for fear of being trampled on. However, they hated Lu Ming to the core and wished they could tear him into pieces. Tai Xing and the others broke out in cold sweat. Tai Xing quietly walked to Lu Ming's side and said, "Commander, wasn't this too much? What if the experts from the Sky Martial Sword faction come? What are you afraid of? We're from the Law Enforcement Hall, and we enforce the law on behalf of the Sage Emperor. What's there to be afraid of?" Lu Ming said casually. Tai Xing and the rest were speechless. They could only brace themselves ears and wait with Lu Ming. What happened here also spread like a whirlwind. What? There was such a thing? There's such an awesome commander. Let's go and take a look. When many people heard the news, they didn't believe it at first. Then they were extremely curious and wanted to go and see. Many disciples and geniuses of the Overlord forces were shocked when they heard the news. In the past few years, the power of the royal family had been deteriorating, and the law enforcement army was like an empty name. The geniuses and disciples of the Overlord forces could do whatever they wanted in the Holy City. The law enforcement army did not dare to control them and tried to curry favor with them. Now, someone actually dared to beat up the Heaven's Martial Sword School's prodigy. This piqued the curiosity of many people, and they all rushed over to watch. In the 8th Prince's residence, Xiezhen was drinking tea in the courtyard when Shizheng rushed in. "Guard Shi, what's the rush?" Xiezhen asked. "8th Prince, it's about that Ming Lu," Shizheng said. "Oh, that blind guy, is he dead? Even if he didn't die, he wouldn't be able to live on. Humph, you dare to injure this prince, you really don't have eyes, you dog." Xiezhen took a sip of tea and slowly said, "He's not dead. That guy is really audacious. Huang Ku from the Huang family killed someone some time ago, and he actually crippled Huang Ku's cultivation." Shizheng answered. He destroyed Huang Ku's cultivation? The Huang family didn't come to kill that Ming Lu? Xiezhen asked curiously. Of course they went. A spirit god expert, an old monster with a perfect spirit embryo, and even the commander of the law enforcement army. Shizheng said. Oh, in that case, is Ming Lu still alive? Xiezhen was a little curious. In his opinion, in such a situation, Ming Lu should have been killed by the Huang family's spiritual god. Know that Ming Lu's combat strength is astonishing. He was actually able to block the spiritual god's attack, and even use the carelessness of a saint emperor. Shizheng briefly explained what happened last time. Damn it, this Ming Lu actually has such a cultivation, and he even used the name of my imperial family. Humph, he's lucky to have escaped this disaster. After Xiezhen heard this, his expression turned ugly and he was very unhappy. You just rushed here and said it was because of Ming Lu. What happened to him? He's dead for sure this time. He actually beat up a disciple of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction. Shi Zheng told him about how Lu Ming had injured the disciples of the Heavenly Sword faction, and how he was now waiting for the experts of the faction. This Minglu is really bold. Haha, let's see how he dies this time. Let's go, we can't miss such a good show. Let's go and take a look. Xiezhen got up excitedly and rushed over with Shi Zheng. In the northeast of the sacred city, in front of the restaurant, Lu Ming was stepping on the face of a disciple of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction, waiting quietly. In the sky, more and more people came, filling the sky. Wuxia is here. A loud cry rang out, shaking the entire place. In one direction, many people opened up a path. In the sky over there, two figures stepped through the air. One of them was the second-grade heaven's favorite of the Heavenly Sword faction, Wuxia. Shifang was following behind Wuxia. Lu Ming was slightly stunned. Then he realized that Shifang must have informed Wuxia. In fact, it was true. The moment Shifang heard that Lu Ming had injured a disciple of the Heavenly Sword faction, he knew that his chance had come. He had always wanted to befriend a heaven's favorite like Wuxia, but he never had the chance. Now the chance to please him had come. Without hesitation, he rushed to Wuxia's residence and passed on the news to him. As expected, Wuxia was furious and came to kill him. Wuxia walked very slowly, one step at a time. With every step he took, the sky buzzed and shook as if it couldn't withstand Wuxia's anger. Wuxia's eyes were filled with killing intent and his voice was cold. Bastards of the Law Enforcement Hall, how dare you injure the disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction? Good, very good. You're alone? What about Wu Changkong? I heard that you and your senior brother were beaten up by Lu Shaoqing. I'm going to learn from Lu Shaoqing and beat you up. It's a pity that you're the only one. Lu Ming cast a casual glance at Wuxia and said indifferently. The crowd was stunned. This commander was too awesome, right? Was Wuxia not enough? He wanted to learn from Lu Shaoqing and beat up Wu Changkong and Wuxia? Who did he think he was? Wuxia was a second-class world and was famous all over the world. His cultivation had already reached the spiritual god realm. Such a Heaven's Pride expert's combat strength was not something that ordinary spiritual god realm powerhouses could compare to. Back then, Lu Ming was able to block a move from the Huang family's spiritual god. Did he really think that he could compete with such a Heaven's Pride expert? He was too naive. Many people shook their heads, thinking that this overpowered commander would die today. Tai Xing and the rest had ugly expressions on their faces. They did not dare to say a word and could only stand behind Lu Ming with gritted teeth. He had no choice. In such a situation, he could only hold on. Hee. Then I'll see how you're going to beat him up. Wuxia laughed out of anger and stepped forward. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled, and the sword power was vast. The sword chi stirred the wind and clouds. A terrible light was emitted from Wuxia's body. Every light was like a sword chi. The sword chi was endless. Chapter 1106. 1106 Chapter 1106 Suppressing Wuxia. Those who had never seen a second-grade heaven's favorite in action were shocked. Was this what a second-grade heaven's favorite was? The power was too terrifying. Oh! Many people retreated in a frenzy, afraid of being touched by Wuxia's sword. A Heaven's Pride expert like him could kill experts of the same level with his sword's sharpness alone. This commander is dead for sure. Seeing Wuxia's power, many people sighed. Wuxia was so powerful. What could Lu Ming use to block him? Die! Die! Wuxia shouted coldly. His palm was like a sword. Light burst forth and formed a dazzling sword ray that slashed toward Lu Ming. As the sword radiance slashed, even the space was torn apart, revealing a terrifying pitch-black spatial rift. This, not good, quickly dodge. Behind Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the rest were terrified. Faced with such a powerful sword, they felt that it was impossible to resist. If they resisted, they would only die. They shouted and wanted to retreat, but they found that their bodies were covered by a terrifying sword power, and they couldn't move. It's over. I've finally been killed by this unreliable commander. A thought flashed through the minds of Tai Xing and the others. However, at this moment, they saw a long spear condensed in Lu Ming's hands. The long spear shook and hummed. Even the space trembled. At this moment, Tai Xing and the others realized that the sword power that enveloped them had disappeared. They had regained their freedom. Buzz! Then they saw Lu Ming holding a long spear and sweeping it out. This spear was like a long spear sweeping across the surface of water. This was because wherever the long spear passed, layers of ripples would appear in the space. Moreover, these ripples would all gather on the long spear. Bang! The long spear and the sword radiance collided. Only a soft sound was heard before Wuxi's sword radiance was destroyed. He blocked it. Tai Xing and the others were stunned. The surrounding onlookers were also stunned. This awesome commander could actually block Wuxi's move. When did a commander of the law enforcement army become so powerful? A bunch of questions flashed through everyone's mind. Wuxi was also stunned. Apparently, he did not expect that a law enforcement soldier could block his attack. Although he did not use his full strength, he still felt embarrassed. Who was he? A second-grade heaven's favorite whose name shook the central continent, an existence second only to the top 5 young men, couldn't take down a mere commander of the law enforcement army with one move. This made him burst out with even stronger and burning killing intent. Good, very good. You do have some ability. But today your end is already decided. Die! Wuxi shouted coldly. The sword chi around his body became even hotter. Vital essence gushed out continuously and finally turned into a sword chi that was several times more terrifying than before. It slashed toward Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming still swept out his spear casually and destroyed Wuxi's sword aura, turning it into nothing. Show me your true ability, or it won't be enough. Lu Ming looked at Wuxi from the corner of his eyes. Damn it! Wuxi shouted and unsheathed his sword. The sword radiance was so bright that it seemed like it was going to split the heaven and earth. Kill! Wuxi wielded his combat sword with terrifying might. As he slashed out with his combat sword, the space around him shattered. Heavens, he's too strong. Wuxi is furious. He's too terrifying. Retreat! Retreat! Many people shouted and retreated madly again. Who? Lu Ming held the spear in one hand. The long spear in his hand slashed violently and turned into 1,000 meters long. It swept out in a brutal manner. With a bang, Wuxi's sword aura was shattered again. However, this time Lu Ming did not stop. The terrifying giant spear continued to press down on Wuxi. Impossible! Impossible! Wuxi shouted in disbelief. He had already performed a divine-level martial arts technique, but he was still defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? He could not believe it. What he could not stand the most was that he felt a strong sense of danger when Lu Ming swept his spear at him. How could a mere law enforcement army, which was as insignificant as an ant, have such a powerful expert? Burst, burst! Die! He roared in his heart and activated his divine bloodline. He merged his bloodline and turned it into a sword with shocking sword chi. Suppress! Lu Ming stepped into the air. His long spear contained the power of the prison-suppressing heaven technique. He changed the momentum of the spear and smashed it down at Wuxi. Clang! The long spear hit the combat sword that Wuxi had transformed into. The attack launched by the combat sword was instantly destroyed. The combat sword shook violently and finally exploded with a bang. The combat sword exploded, revealing Wuxi's body. His face was pale and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Everyone in the surroundings looked at this scene in disbelief. Wuxi was defeated. Wuxi was actually defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? What was going on? Was he still a commander of the law enforcement army? How could he be so powerful? Those who had thought that Lu Ming was dead for sure almost bit off their tongues and glared at him until their eyes burst. It was too unbelievable. As for Shifeng, he thought he was dreaming. Wasn't Minglu only at the 7th level of the spirit embryo realm? Wasn't he just a disciple of the Black Spear sect? How could he be so strong? His body trembled in disbelief. As for Tai Xing and the others, they were completely petrified. The 3 disciples of the heavenly martial sword faction were also petrified, staring at the sky in a daze. How weak! I was wondering how strong a second-grade heaven's favorite of the heavenly sword faction would be. Lu Ming pursed his lips, his face full of disdain. Wucang was furious. He was so furious that he wanted to roar at the sky. In the past he was terrifyingly talented and powerful. In the Heavenly Sword faction, only Wu Changkong could beat him. Even in the Battle of Karmic Luck, he had not lost too badly. But recently he was first killed by Lu Shaoqing in the secret realm of the Saint Mansion. If not for the life talisman, he would not have been able to keep his life. Now, he was actually defeated by a mere commander of the law enforcement army. This was a great humiliation. From now on, his name, Wucang, would become a laughingstock and his reputation would be greatly reduced. How could he not be angry and hate her? If he knew that Lu Shaoqing and the commander of the law enforcement army were the same person, what would he think? Bastard, just you wait. You're dead. Wucang roared and retreated. Since you're here, where do you want to go? Have a good rest with your junior brothers. Lu Ming took a step forward. His body was like a stream of light and he rushed in front of Wucang in a few moments. Don't you dare. Wucang roared. Lu Ming actually wanted to suppress him and let him lie there like the other disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction. How dare he? He was the second Heaven's Pride expert of the Heavenly Sword faction. He was completely different from the other Heaven's Pride experts. Suppress. Lu Ming's eyes were cold as he stepped in the air. The power of the 9 dragons' heaven-stomping steps burst out. He took 7 consecutive steps toward Wucang. Bang! 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 Wucang's body trembled violently. He was injured and could not withstand the impact. His body shook violently and blood spurted out of his mouth. In the end, Lu Ming stepped on his face. He screamed and fell to the ground. He came into close contact with the ground and created a human-shaped pit. Chapter 1107. 1107 The Elder of the Heavenly Sword faction takes action. Bang! Oh! Lu Ming's body fell and he stepped on Wucang again, causing him to scream in pain. His cultivation was completely sealed by Lu Ming, and he could not exert any strength. The crowd gasped. The commander of the law enforcement army was too ruthless. He even dared to suppress Wucang. How overbearing. Lu Ming grabbed Wucang and threw him to the side of the other 3 disciples of the Sky Martial Sword faction. The 3 disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction looked at each other and then at Wucang, who was standing at the side. Their expressions were very interesting. Initially, they were suppressed by Lu Ming and were lying on the ground like dogs eating shit. They felt extremely humiliated. However, when they saw Wucang lying on the ground, they felt much better. Even a Heaven's Pride expert like Wucang was suppressed and laid on the ground. It made sense that they were lying on the ground. Ah! Wucang howled like a wild beast. He was so angry, especially when he saw the strange looks from the people around him. He wanted to kill himself. Of course, he was only thinking about it. How could he bear to die? He had a great future ahead of him. Where are you going? At this moment, Lu Ming's gaze was fixed on a person in the sky not far away. That person was Shifang. When he saw that even Wucang was suppressed, he was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He was about to sneak away when Lu Ming saw him. His face revealed a smile that was uglier than crying, and said, Ming Lu, what are you trying to do? What do you want? You're an Imperial Dragon Guard, but you actually brought people from the Heavenly Martial Sword sect to deal with the Law Enforcement Hall. You're a traitor, and you're colluding with foreign enemies. What do you think I'm doing? Lu Ming sneered. His essential core exploded and he grabbed at Shifang in the air. What? Shifang was shocked. He wanted to retreat, but he felt a terrible force envelop him. He couldn't move. The next moment, a force pulled him down and he fell to the ground. Ah, don't! He screamed. Bang! Lu Ming lifted his leg and stomped on Shifang's dantian. Shifang arched his body like a big shrimp and let out a heart-wrenching scream. My cultivation, you've destroyed my cultivation. Shifang let out a desperate roar. The spirit embryo in his dantian was crushed by Lu Ming. I'll cripple your cultivation as punishment. Get lost. With that, he kicked and Shifang flew out like a ball. He turned into a black dot and disappeared in the air. Lu Ming did not know how far he had flown. He could not be bothered to think about whether he would fall to his death. All right, not a bad harvest. What are you guys doing? Bring them all back to the law enforcement hall. Lu Ming looked at Taixing and the rest. Bring him back to the law enforcement hall? Taixing and the others looked at each other, their expressions ugly. Of course, only by bringing them back will we have the capital to negotiate with them. Do you think that the Heavenly Martial Sword faction will let this matter rest if you let them go? Don't just stand there, take them away. Lu Ming waved his hand and grabbed Wuxia. He stepped into the air and headed toward the law enforcement hall. Taixing and the rest were helpless. They could only bring the other 3 disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction and follow Lu Ming. There's going to be a great show. This matter will definitely attract the elders of the Heavenly Martial Sword School. Let's go and take a look. This commander is indeed powerful. However, let's see how he's going to deal with the elder generation of the Heavenly Sword faction. Let's go and take a look. There were tens of thousands of people in the surrounding crowd. They followed Lu Ming from a distance and headed towards the law enforcement hall. Furthermore, the number of people was increasing. Not long after Lu Ming and the rest left, Xiezhen and Shizheng rushed over. When they heard that Wuxia was suppressed by Lu Ming, the 2 of them were dumbfounded and in disbelief. Initially, they were certain that Wuxia would beat Lu Ming to a pulp or even kill him on the spot. They did not expect that the outcome would be the complete opposite of what they had expected. To the law enforcement hall. Xiezhen brought Shizheng and hurried to the law enforcement hall. When Lu Ming and the rest brought Wuxia and the rest back to the law enforcement hall, the remaining law enforcement soldiers were stunned. Then their eyes were filled with fear. Lu Ming had actually suppressed the disciples of the Heaven Martial Sword faction, and even Wuxia. This was a huge blow to the heavens. How were they going to deal with the elders of the Heaven Martial Sword faction who would go crazy in the future? We're the law enforcement army, enforcing the law on behalf of the Sage Emperor. What are we afraid of? Follow my arrangements and get to work. Lu Ming shouted and then instructed Taixing and the rest. As for Lu Ming, he threw Wuxia and the others on the ground in a row. He took out an armchair and sat there, closing his eyes to rest. The onlookers looked at each other. This commander of the law enforcement army was really bold. At this moment he was actually so leisurely sitting on the armchair with his eyes closed. The sky above the law enforcement hall was filled with people, and as time passed, more and more people appeared. This time it was different from the previous time. This time it was against the Heavenly Martial Sword faction. Furthermore, a second-grade Heaven's favorite had been suppressed. This caused a huge commotion, and many people were shocked and rushed over to watch. Xiezhen and Shizheng had arrived. There were even second-grade Heaven's favorites from other overlord forces. Everyone saw Jing Kongling, Kong Xian and Goddess Tanxiang. There were also Shui Luo Ziyin Bupo and so on. There were at least 7 to 8 people. The elites were shocked to see Lu Ming sitting on the armchair with his eyes closed. Wuxia was as famous as they were, but this unassuming commander of the law enforcement army was so powerful that he could suppress Wuxia. This shocked them. The royal family of the ancient Saint dynasty is indeed powerful. Even a commander of the law enforcement army is so powerful. Some people thought to them slaviers. All of a sudden, a terrifying pressure descended from the sky. Everyone felt as if a mountain was pressing down on their bodies. There was a chi activity that let out a terrifying roar. Under the pressure, the crowd took the initiative to open up a path. 3 old men stepped through the air with gloomy expressions. These 3 elders were all dressed in white robes and carried ancient swords on their backs. Their bodies seemed to be filled with endless sword chi, and just their auras were extremely shocking. It's here. Everyone's heart trembled. The elders of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction were on the move. At this moment, Lu Ming also opened his eyes and looked at the sky. The 3 powerhouses of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction flew over and finally stopped in the sky above the law enforcement hall. Bastard, you're finished. You're dead. Haha, you're dead. Wuxia saw the arrival of the 3 old men and cried out in joy. Bang! Lu Ming got up and stomped on Wuxia's face, causing his face to smash heavily on the ground. He took a bite of the soil and struggled madly with his limbs. He was so aggrieved that he was about to explode. The onlookers shuddered in their hearts. Lu Ming actually dared to do this in the face of 3 seniors from the heavenly martial sword faction. He was simply lawless. The 3 elders' gazes were as sharp as swords as they landed on Lu Ming. How audacious! An old man shouted angrily, his eyes extremely gloomy as he rebuked, "Kid, do you know who you've captured? Aren't they just a few pieces of trash from the heavenly martial sword faction? Why, do you think it's a glorious thing to raise a few pieces of trash?" Lu Ming pursed his lips and said casually, "Eh." He appeared to be very calm, as if he didn't care about the elders of the heavenly martial sword sect. Chapter 1108. 1108 Extorting the Heavenly Sword Sect. Impudent. Oh, how audacious! He should be killed. The 3 elders of the heavenly sword faction shouted one after another. Their eyes were cold, and their bodies were filled with sword chi and sword power. Haha, he really brought this upon himself. This lowly thing is dead for sure. In the air, the 8th Prince Xiezhan sneered. "Brat, you and everyone else in the law enforcement hall should commit suicide. I'll let this matter go. Otherwise, not only you, but your family and the forces behind you will not be able to escape punishment." The old man who had spoken first continued to speak, his tone filled with superiority and unquestionable authority. His gaze swept across Tai Xing and the others, causing their hearts to turn cold and their faces to turn ashen. "Ha ha ha!" Suddenly, Lu Ming laughed and stomped his foot on Wucong's face, causing him to scream in pain. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he looked coldly at the old man from the heavenly sword faction. "Guilty? Not pursue the matter? What a joke! What right do you have to pursue this? We're the ones who should be held accountable. A disciple of the heavenly martial sword faction killed someone in the sacred city for no reason. We, the law enforcement army, enforce the law impartially and represent the current Saint Emperor in enforcing the law. Yet, your heavenly martial sword faction has come to the law enforcement hall to kill. Not putting the current sage emperor in his eyes? Do you really think that there's no one else in the royal family?" The elder from the heavenly martial sword faction was shocked when he heard that. He looked at Wucong, who was still at Lu Ming's feet, and his expression turned ugly. Lu Ming had used the royal family and the sage emperor to suppress them. Even if they really did not care about the royal family, they could not say it out loud. After all, the ancient Saint dynasty was still in charge of the world. Furthermore, they were still in the sacred city, within the core territory of the ancient Saint dynasty. No matter how arrogant the heavenly martial sword sect was, they had to be wary of them. "Brat, what do I have to do for you to let them go?" The old man who spoke first said coldly and glanced at Wucong and the others. Wucong, a second-class heaven's favorite, had the potential to become a martial emperor in the future. They could not afford to lose him. They planned to save Wucong first. Let them go? Fine, but since they have committed a crime, they should be punished. How about this? Use raw stones to redeem them. 500,000 raw stones for each of the 3 trash. 2 million raw stones it is. Lu Ming said indifferently. As soon as he said that, the entire place burst into an uproar. Extortion. This was blatant extortion. This puny commander of the law enforcement army actually dared to extort an expert from the heavenly martial sword faction. He was simply blinded by wealth and audacious. He didn't know what death was. The 3 elders of the heavenly martial sword faction were also infuriated. Their eyes even turned red. Even though they had lived for thousands of years, they had never met such a bold person. To think that he would try to extort them, the heavenly martial sword faction. He was simply courting death. "Evil beast, I'll kill you." The elder who spoke first was so angry that he could not hold it in any longer. With a long howl, a terrifying sword chi condensed and slashed towards Lu Ming. 4th level of the spiritual god realm. The old man who attacked was a 4th level spiritual god realm expert. His combat strength was several times stronger than Wucong's. Lu Ming's glabella glowed and a small fiery red pagoda appeared. Then it rapidly grew in size. This small pagoda was the spirit weapon that Lu Ming had obtained from the Saint Mansion's secret realm. After so many days of refinement, Lu Ming had already begun to refine it. The aura of the spirit weapon had also been completely concealed, and outsiders could not sense it at all. Lu Ming wanted to take this opportunity to test the power of the small pagoda. Anyway, there were countless tower-shaped spirit weapons in the world. Lu Ming was not afraid of being recognized. He just had to restrain his aura. Lu Ming grabbed the tower and smashed it at the sword gleam. With a loud boom, the sword gleam was destroyed. Lu Ming's body did not even move. The Emperor's spiritual weapon consumes too much true yuan. I really can't use much of its power. Lu Ming muttered in his heart. He had consumed a large amount of essential core just now. Even a martial emperor would be envious of an emperor's spiritual weapon, so it was normal for him to be unable to unleash its power. He muttered as he put away the small pagoda. He was not satisfied, but the others were already shocked. Lu Ming could even block the attack of a 4th-level spiritual god realm expert. He was too powerful. At this moment, Lu Ming was simply unfathomable in everyone's eyes. Every time others thought that he had reached his limit, the strength he revealed was beyond everyone's imagination. You're just a mere law enforcement army. Your treasures are good, but let's see how many moves you can block with just your treasures? The elder from the Heavenly Martial Sword School shouted in anger, and his aura became even more astonishing. A sword light shot up 10,000 meters into the sky, and the sword power was vast and terrifying. If the tiger doesn't show its might, it'll think I'm a sick cat. Kill! Lu Ming shouted as a long spear condensed in his hand. He pierced it through one of the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword School. The disciple of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction screamed in pain as he was pinned to the ground by Lu Ming. Lu Ming had told them in a thunderous manner that they should not think that he would not dare to kill. Give me the Ori rocks to redeem them. Otherwise, I'll kill them all. Lu Ming's voice was very cold. Lu Ming would not miss such a good opportunity to extort money. Cultivating by purely absorbing the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth was too slow. After such a long time, Lu Ming's current cultivation was only at the middle stage of the 2nd level of the spiritual god realm. If he had a large number of origin stones to devour, his cultivation would improve rapidly. He was currently lacking resources. In half a month's time, the million-year national sacrifice would begin. The competition set by the Sage Emperor would also begin. Lu Ming's goal was to get into the top 3. The Sage Emperor could agree to one condition for the top 3. However, it wasn't that easy to get into the top 3. When Yang Patian and Tuoba Shur were in the Saint Mansion's secret realm, their cultivation had already reached the peak of the 2nd level of the spiritual god realm. Now that a period of time had passed, it was very possible that they would make a breakthrough. If a heaven's favorite like Yang Patian had reached the 3rd level of the spiritual god realm, it would be more troublesome for him to defeat him. Moreover, there were 5 such heaven's favorites in the central continent, and also the southern underworld. It would not be easy for the heaven's favorites from the western desert to get into the top 3. However, if Lu Ming's cultivation also broke through to the 3rd level of the spiritual god realm, he would have full confidence. How audacious! Evil creature, you're looking for death. Kill! Lu Ming's killing of a disciple from the Heavenly Martial Sword faction had thoroughly enraged the 3 elders. A terrifying aura burst forth and Sword Chi soared into the sky. The murderous intent was extremely cold, as if winter had arrived. The other 2 elders' auras were even more terrifying. They were stronger than the elder who had attacked earlier and definitely surpassed the 4th level of the spiritual god realm. If such experts wanted to join forces, their auras would be too shocking. Law enforcement flag, please! Lu Ming suddenly shouted. The law enforcement flag is here. In the law enforcement hall, Tai Xing carried a large flag and rushed out. Lu Ming took it and stuck it into the ground. Oh! It was a 10-meter-long flag with a sword and a saber embroidered on it. They were extremely sharp, as if they were real swords. However, the flag looked very old and was even covered in dust. One look and one could tell that it had not been used for a long time. But as soon as this flag appeared, the chi of the 3 elders from the Heavenly Martial Sword sect in the sky suddenly stagnated. They didn't attack, but looked at the flag with uncertain expressions. Chapter 1109. 1109 If you want to kill me, kill the 8th prince first. It's the flag of law enforcement. The flag of law enforcement. Oh. The law enforcement flag created by the ancient Saint Emperor in the ancient times. The crowd began to discuss, and many people's eyes were solemn. The flag of law enforcement was created in the ancient era, when the ancient Saint Emperor established the law enforcement army. It was used to enforce the law in the world. 30,000 years ago, wherever the law enforcement flag passed, no one wasn't terrified. Its deterrent force was monstrous. However, after the war 30,000 years ago, the ancient Saint dynasty was weakened and the law enforcement army was useless. The law enforcement flag lost its power, and it had been many years since anyone used the law enforcement flag. However, at this moment, the appearance of the law enforcement flag still made people's hearts tremble. Do you think you can stop us by taking out the law enforcement flag? You're really naive. You'll die today. An elder shouted and stepped forward. With every step, sword chi filled the air and cut open the space. This was an existence that surpassed the 4th level of the spiritual god realm, or even beyond the 5th level of the spiritual god realm. He was too powerful. How dare you? The flag of law enforcement is here. We are the law enforcement army. By setting up the flag of law enforcement, we represent the ancient Saint dynasty, the royal family, and the Saint Emperor. The heavenly martial sword sect is completely disrespecting the royal family and the Saint Emperor. Is the heavenly martial sword sect trying to rebel? Are you trying to destroy the royal family and replace the Xie clan? Lu Ming stood up straight and pointed the long spear in his palm at Wu Cong's back. He shouted loudly. His words swept through the entire area like a storm, causing the 3 elders of the heavenly martial sword school to look extremely grim. Lu Ming had made a big mistake. He directly accused them of wanting to rebel and destroy the imperial family and the Xie family. Although the heavenly martial sword faction really had such thoughts, could they say such things out loud? Moreover, the heavenly martial sword sect didn't have the strength to do so. Tianwu sword faction, you have the ambition of a wolf. You look down on the imperial family and the imperial power. Today the 8th prince is here, and you want to rebel in front of him, look down on the imperial power and the Xie family? How could the 8th prince tolerate you? At the end of his sentence, Lu Ming cast his gaze at Xie Zhen. Lu Ming had long discovered Xie Zhen. The other people also looked at the 8th prince. Xie Zhen's face fell and he cursed Lu Ming 1,000 times in his heart. Lu Ming was using him as a shield. But what could he do in this situation? Lu Ming took out the flag of law enforcement. The flag of law enforcement was created by the ancient sacred emperor back then. His ancestor was equivalent to the face of the royal Xie family. Lu Ming was a member of the law enforcement army, and he enforced the law on behalf of the sage emperor. If the heavenly martial sword sect were to make a move on Lu Ming, or even kill him, it would be a slap to the face of the imperial family and the Xie family. To put it more seriously, it would be a rebellion. Under such circumstances, Lu Ming had dragged him down with him again. If Xie Zhen ignored him in front of everyone, he would not be able to bear the consequences if this news spread to the royal family, the Xie family, and even the sage emperor. Moreover, there were more than a dozen princes and they were not very harmonious. They fought openly and secretly. If he did not handle it well today and embarrass the royal family, the other princes might use this to attack him. At the thought of this, Xie Zhen gritted his teeth. He could not wait to cut Lu Ming. 8th prince, am I wrong? Lu Ming continued to ask. Well said. In the end, Xie Zhen gritted his teeth and descended from the sky. He stood beside Lu Ming and faced the 3 elders from the Heaven Martial Sword sect. He said unwillingly, this time Commander Ming Lu is right. This time, it was the disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword sect who committed the crime first. The law enforcement army will handle it impartially and protect the face of our imperial family. After he finished speaking, Xie Zhen's heart felt even more disgusted than if he had eaten a dead rat. He was aggrieved. He was simply too aggrieved. What was his purpose in transferring Lu Ming to the law enforcement army? Wasn't it to let Lu Ming offend the people from the big forces and be killed by the powerful people from the big forces with one slap? But now? He had achieved the initial effect, but the later stage was completely different from what he had expected. Not only was Lu Ming not killed, but he even had to step in personally to protect Lu Ming. What the hell is this? He was aggrieved. He hated Lu Ming so much that he gritted his teeth and almost broke them. The 8th prince is right. He is indeed an outstanding talent of the royal family. If you 3 old fogies want to kill me today, you will have to step over the 8th prince's dead body first. Come on, come at me if you have the ability. Lu Ming clamored. Xiezhen almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What did he mean by if you want to kill him, you have to step over the 8th prince's dead body? Xiezhen was so angry that he almost vomited blood. However, he could not back down at this moment. He could only grit his teeth and stare at the 3 elders from the Heavenly Sword faction. In the eyes of others, Xiezhen had a kind of righteous and fearless spirit. They did not know that it was all because he was angered by Lu Ming. The 3 elders from the Heavenly Martial Sword faction looked gloomy and unsightly. The 8th prince Xiezhen was not like Lu Ming, who could be killed easily. Xiezhen was the current Saint Emperor's son, and they were in the Holy City. If they really dared to kill Xiezhen in front of everyone, it would definitely cause the imperial family Xie clan to take revenge, and they could forget about leaving the Holy City. In the crowd there were also many law enforcement soldiers who had come from other law enforcement halls to watch the show. At this time their blood was boiling, and their hearts were extremely comfortable. All these years, the people of the law enforcement army had been too cowardly and aggrieved. He lived worse than a dog. When those people from the major forces committed a crime, they still had to take raw stones and treasures out to ask the other party to admit their mistakes. How were they going to live their days? Now, when they saw this scene, they really had a feeling of exultation. It was really too good. Law enforcement army, law enforcement flag. The current Saint Emperor will enforce the law. One of the burly men roared as he stepped into the air. A large flag suddenly appeared in his hand. Law enforcement flag. At this moment, another law enforcement soldier from the law enforcement hall held a law enforcement flag and stuck it beside Lu Ming's flag. He stood beside Lu Ming. The law enforcing army is the law enforcing army on behalf of the Sage Emperor, the law enforcing army. Another group of people shouted and rushed out, standing behind the burly man. They were all from another law enforcement hall, and there were more than 100 of them. Haha, that's right, the law enforcement army. The current Saint Emperor will enforce the law. Another person laughed and rushed out. Another law enforcement flag appeared and was placed in a row with the first 2. Haha, I'm here too. Law enforcement. With loud roars, law enforcement troops appeared one after another. Law enforcement flags appeared and were planted in a row. In the end, there were a total of 9 law enforcement flags, which were inserted in a row, fluttering in the wind. The law enforcement hall from all directions in the Holy City had come. They took out their law enforcement flags and wanted to advance and retreat with Lu Ming and the rest. Nearly 1,000 people stood behind Lu Ming and Xiezhen, glaring at the 3 elders from the Heavenly Martial Sword faction in the air. Usually they would swallow their grievances, but today they would risk it all. The surrounding crowd looked at this scene in shock. It had been many years since the 9 law enforcement flags were raised. Today it was happening again because of Lu Ming. Now let's see what the Heavenly Martial Sword faction will do. Detestable. Xiezhen roared in his heart. However, in this situation he could only hold on. The 3 elders from the Heavenly Martial Sword faction had gloomy expressions. They had not expected that things would develop to this stage. Right now they were in a dilemma. Chapter 1110. 1110 Chapter 1110 Retreating dejectedly. They could neither advance nor retreat. If they advanced, they would offend the ancient Saint dynasty. If they retreated, they would lose all their face. They glared at Lu Ming coldly, their eyes filled with killing intent. They could not wait to cut Lu Ming into pieces. The reason for this situation was all because of Lu Ming. Just as the 2 sides were confronting each other, in the distance, A golden light filled the air and shot towards them. The speed was so fast that it exceeded people's reaction time. Many people had only just reacted to the golden light when it had already appeared in front of them. A dignified middle-aged man with his hands behind his back appeared in the air. He was wearing a golden dragon robe, a golden crown and golden boots. A majestic and vast aura was released from his body, making it difficult for everyone to breathe. It was as if they were facing a human king inspecting the world. Imperial Uncle. Upon seeing the middle-aged man, Xiezhen exclaimed in shock. Everyone's hearts trembled. The imperial uncle that Xiezhen addressed must be the younger brother of the current sage emperor. The important figures of the royal family and the Xie family had appeared. It has appeared. Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. Today's incident had caused such a huge commotion. Lu Ming was certain that the royal family and the Xie family would definitely send someone to protect the dignity of the royal family. After all, even though the ancient Saint dynasty was weak, it still had its foundations and was still the most powerful force in the central continent. Xiezhen's imperial uncle looked at Xiezhen and nodded his head. You not bad. Then, he looked at the three elders of the heavenly martial sword faction and said, the rules of the sacred city state that no one is allowed to kill innocent people in the sacred city. If you have any grudges, you can go up to the battle platform. No one cares about your life or death. However, if you kill someone for no reason in the sacred city, you are disregarding the dignity of the ancient Saint dynasty. The law enforcement army has the right to enforce the law. The disciples of the heavenly martial sword sect have committed a crime despite knowing the truth. A majestic voice came from Xiezhen's imperial uncle's mouth and spread throughout the entire area. Everyone's heart trembled, but then they came to a realization. The 1,000,000-year period of the ancient Saint dynasty was drawing to a close, and the matter had been blown up to such an extent. The royal family of the Xie family had to uphold the dignity of the royal family. If they were to compromise with the Tianwu sword faction today, the royal family would be trampled on by others in the future, and they would be even weaker than before. If today's matter had not blown up and the powerhouse from the heavenly martial sword faction had slapped Lu Ming to death, then everything would have passed without a ripple. But now that the matter had blown up, the royal family and the Xie family had to support the law enforcement army. The three elders of the heavenly martial sword faction had ugly expressions on their faces. They knew this very well. Then what do we have to do to release him? The three elders of the heavenly martial sword faction looked at each other, and one of them spoke. It was obvious that he had given in. The law enforcement army naturally has its own rules. You can discuss with the commander of the law enforcement army what to do. The middle-aged royal uncle said. I've already stated my conditions. Let's do it that way. If you're guilty, you should be punished. Lu Ming narrowed his eyes and smiled. The three elders of the Sky Martial Sword faction looked extremely gloomy. After pondering for a while, one of them took out a storage ring and waved it a few times before throwing it to Lu Ming. Lu Ming caught it and scanned it with his spiritual sense. His face darkened and said, Why are you missing 500,000? You don't want this guy anymore? Lu Ming pointed at the disciple of the Sky Martial Sword faction that he had killed. You've already killed him, and you still want to keep him? An elder of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction said in a deep voice. A corpse is still a human. If you don't want his corpse, I'll throw it out to feed the dogs. Lu Ming said indifferently. You. The elder's eyes were filled with killing intent, but Lu Ming looked at him indifferently, without the slightest fear. In the end, the Heavenly Martial Sword faction had no choice but to give in. For the sake of their reputation, they could only take out another 500,000 Ori rocks. You trash, take them away. Lu Ming waved his hand. Wu Tsong and three other disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction flew into the air. An elder waved his hand and took it. He stared at Lu Ming coldly and said, You very good, very good. I hope you will stay in the holy city forever. In the law enforcement army. With that, he snorted coldly, turned into three sword lights and disappeared. Who? The crowd of onlookers let out a long sigh of relief. There was still a look of disbelief in their eyes. This matter had actually ended like this. The elder of the heavenly martial sword faction had come with a strong force, but in the end, he had left with his tail between his legs, leaving behind a few million raw stones. No one had expected this to be the result. Everyone's gaze eventually landed on Lu Ming, this impressive commander. Before this, no one would have paid any attention to a mere commander of the law enforcement army. However, he had now attracted everyone's attention. First, he used his strong combat strength to suppress Wu Tsang. Later on, he even blocked an attack from a 4th-level spiritual god realm expert. Although Lu Ming used a treasure, it also proved his powerful combat ability. But what was more important was his courage in his mind. He dared to go up against an elder of the heavenly martial sword faction alone, and was skilled at using the power of the royal family, the Xie clan, and even the ancient Saint Emperor who had created the law enforcement army to force the elder of the heavenly martial sword faction to retreat in defeat. He really couldn't believe that all of this had been done by this bearded man. With such means, if he was 10 years younger, he would be able to compete with all the heroes in the world. Zhener, let's go. In the air, the middle-aged royal uncle glanced at Xie Zhen. Then his gaze fell on Lu Ming. What's your name? The middle-aged imperial uncle asked. Bright Road. Lu Ming replied in a neither humble nor arrogant manner. Bright Road? Good, you're very good. The middle-aged imperial uncle said good a few times, then waved his hand and left. Malicious intent towards me. Lu Ming looked at the sky deep in thought. The middle-aged imperial uncle said good several times. Lu Ming did not feel the slightest bit of kindness. Instead, he felt malice. After a few thoughts, Lu Ming's face revealed a cold smile. He could roughly guess why the middle-aged imperial uncle had ill intentions towards him. Right now, the ancient Saint dynasty wanted to form an alliance and work together with some of the overlords to increase their strength. However, although Lu Ming's actions today seemed to have protected the dignity of the royal family, he had also offended the heavenly martial sword sect. Furthermore, he was forcing the royal family to offend the heavenly martial sword sect. In the future, it would be even more difficult for the royal family to befriend the heavenly martial sword sect. The middle-aged imperial uncle naturally did not have a good impression of Lu Ming. In his heart, he could not wait to kill Lu Ming, this meddlesome person, with one slap. Lu Ming smiled faintly. He didn't mind. After all, he had joined the Imperial Dragon Guards, and then the law enforcement army only because he wanted to use this identity to investigate Xian Yanqing's whereabouts. Once he found Xian Yanqing, he would just leave without a word. Who would be able to find him? Mighty, mighty commander. At this time, the most excited ones were the law enforcement army. Each and every one of them was so excited that they were trembling all over, as if they had eaten a large iced watermelon in the hot summer. They were usually too aggrieved, but today they were able to hold their heads up high. Didn't you see that even a hegemon force like the Heavenly Martial Sword Sect admitted defeat in front of the law enforcement army, compensated a large number of raw stones, and left in dejection? This kind of pleasure was brought about by a sudden outburst after being suppressed for a long time. It was simply better than doing anything else. Tai Xing even shouted excitedly. Chapter 11:11. 11:11. The Million-Year Sacrifice begins. The commander is invincible. The commander is mighty. Oh, the mighty Commander Ming. In the beginning, it was Tai Xing and the others who were shouting. Later on, the other law enforcement soldiers of the law enforcement hall also started to shout. Lu Ming raised his hands and everyone quieted down. Brothers of the law enforcement army, I thank you for your help this time. Lu Ming cupped his fists and said. The appearance of the 9 law enforcement flags was also a form of deterrence. Commander Ming, you're too kind. It's you who let our law enforcement army hold our heads high and let out the breath of suffocation in our hearts. We should be the ones thanking you. That's right, we should thank you. The others chimed in. Everyone is too polite. Since everyone is here today, I will treat everyone. Let's have a good time. Tai Xing, bring some brothers and go buy some wine and food. Lu Ming took out some rough stones and handed them to Tai Xing. All right. Tai Xing took the raw stone and brought a few people out in a hurry. At this time, the crowd in the sky also dispersed one by one. Not long after, all of them had left. But today's events spread like a storm. This time, it wasn't the same as the Huang family's matter last time. Last time, the Huang family only attracted a few people's attention and became a topic of discussion after tea and meals. This time, it was against the Overlord faction, the Heavenly Martial Sword faction. Naturally, it caused a commotion. As for the awesome commander Minglu, his reputation was so great that some people even judged him as the most awesome commander of the law enforcement army in 30,000 years. Soon Tai Xing bought a large amount of food and wine. A banquet was held in the law enforcement hall, and there were more than 1,000 law enforcement soldiers drinking and chatting in the law enforcement hall. They only left late at night. Tai Xing, there are 500,000 raw stones here. Take them and share them with your brothers. After the rest of the law enforcement hall's people left, Lu Ming took out a storage ring and handed it to Tai Xing. Commander, you can't do that. You risked your life to get these. We didn't make any contributions. Tai Xing waved his hands. The others also shook their heads. Although they were poor, they were still people with principles. Take it. If you guys didn't support me from behind, the people of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction wouldn't be afraid of us. Take it and split it. Lu Ming passed the storage ring to Tai Xing and returned to his room alone. He closed the door and entered the mountain and river diagram. With a wave of his hand, a huge pile of raw gemstones appeared before his eyes. It was a total of 3 million. It's time to break through to the third level of the spiritual god realm. With a thought, the bloodline of the 9 dragons emerged. He opened his mouth and swallowed 100,000 raw gemstones. He began to refine them. As the raw gemstones were refined continuously, Lu Ming's cultivation level was increasing rapidly. Late stage second level spiritual god realm, peak second level spiritual god realm, and he began to strive for the third level spiritual god realm. 3 days passed by in a flash. After refining all 3 million ori rocks, the essential core in Lu Ming's body surged unceasingly, as if there were countless true dragons roaring in his body. It took a moment before it slowly calmed down. I finally reached the third level of the spiritual god realm. However, I've also used up all 3 million raw stones. Lu Ming opened his eyes, and there was a hint of excitement in his eyes. The consumption was huge, but so were the gains. In just 3 short days, Lu Ming's cultivation had advanced from the middle second level spiritual god realm to the early third level spiritual god realm. Lu Ming's combat strength had increased by a large margin. Lu Ming was more confident about the competition that would take place more than 10 days later. It's been almost 2 years since Martial Emperor Di sealed the Talisman Amulet sect. The Talisman Amulet sect can only hold on for 5 years. There are only a little more than 3 years left. Can I fight against Di by then? Lu Ming could not help but think of the Talisman Amulet sect. At the thought of this, he felt very stressed. It was too difficult to reach the level where he could fight against DE in the remaining 3 years. It was almost impossible according to Lu Ming's current progress. He shook his head. It was useless to think too much. Lu Ming could only push forward with all his might and do his best. He stretched his back lazily. His bones soon vibrated and a series of crackling sounds came from his body. Lu Ming stood up and walked out. In the days that followed, Lu Ming returned to his previous calm. Other than cultivating every day, he would go around the holy city. Ever since the incident at the Heavenly Martial Sword faction, the disciples of the various overlord forces had become more obedient in the holy city, especially in the areas under Lu Ming's jurisdiction. They did not dare to attack others for no reason. Even if there were grudges, it would be on the stage to determine who was stronger. Lu Ming's days were rather carefree. Very quickly, 10 days had passed. The 1,000,000-year national ceremony of the ancient Saint dynasty was about to begin. During this period of time, the holy city was unusually lively. Lu Ming could see powerhouses from all over the world as he walked on the streets. Northern Plains martial artists were all tall and sturdy. Even the females were mostly tall. The weapons they used were either maces, huge hammers, or giant axes. They were all heavy weapons with wild auras. They rode on all kinds of mounts and were easy to recognize. There were also some martial artists who had gloomy auras, either filled with ghost chi or blood chi. Anyone who passed by them would give people a cold feeling. These were all martialists from the southern underworld. There were also some monks and kasayas with bright heads. They were obviously holy monks from the western desert. On the other hand, Lu Ming did not meet many people from the East Baron. On this day, the million-year sacrificial ceremony of the ancient Saint dynasty had finally begun. Buzz. A buzzing sound could be heard in the sky, along with intense fluctuations. Lu Ming, Tai Xing, and the rest walked out of the law enforcement hall and flew into the air to watch. In the sky above the sacred city, colorful clouds filled the air and heavenly music played. The space was constantly distorted in the colorful light. Boom! 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 Finally, a huge platform appeared in the sky. This platform was neither gold nor jade. It was speckled with multicolored light, with true dragons and phoenixes dancing in the air, and divine beasts like Qilin strolling. Of course it couldn't be real but was formed by a formation. Then tables and chairs appeared on the east and west sides of the platform. The tables and chairs were made of fine jade, with dragon and phoenix patterns carved on them. They were extremely luxurious and there were a lot of them. At a glance there were more than 10,000 of them. All of them were floating in the air above the sacred city. After the tables and chairs on the east and west sides appeared, a jade staircase appeared in the north. There were 99 steps and they slanted upwards. At the end of the steps, a huge ancient altar appeared. The altar was ancient and heavy, as if it had gone through the vicissitudes of time. It was 10,000 meters high and disappeared into the clouds. The sage emperor has descended. Suddenly, a voice came from the palace. The voice rolled and spread throughout the entire sacred city. Heavenly music filled the palace as holy light filled the air and soared into the sky. Then a group of people stepped into the air. The man at the front was wearing a golden robe embroidered with the pattern of the human king patrolling the world. He looked to be in his 50s. He had a tall and sturdy figure, and his body was surrounded by a holy light. His eyes were full of stars, and he was full of majesty. Oh! This was Xie Qitian, the current Saint Emperor, a terrifying existence. Chapter 11:12. 11:12 The Gathering of Emperors. Besides Xie Qitian, there were two old men with white hair. They looked ordinary but they exuded a terrifying aura. Lu Ming had seen that aura more than once. Oh! The aura of an emperor. The two old men besides Xie Qitian were also emperors. With Xie Qitian, the royal family had 3 emperors. It was truly terrifying. This was only on the surface. Lu Ming did not believe that there were no hidden sovereigns in the royal family. There were rumors in the world that the old sacred emperor of the ancient sacred dynasty might not be dead. The ancient Saint dynasty was indeed an ancient power that had been around for millions of years. Even though it was weak, it had a deep foundation that was not something that any other overlord power could compare to. Behind Xie Qitian and the two old men, there were more than 10 men and women. All of them had the looks of dragons and phoenixes, dragons among men. The older ones were already middle-aged, while the youngest looked to be in his 20s. There were a total of 15 people, and they were the children of the current sacred emperor, the princes and princesses of the ancient sacred dynasty. Thank you, Nianjuan. Lu Ming was shocked. Among the crowd, he saw a woman who looked very similar to Xian Yanqing. However, she was colder and more holy than Xian Yanqing. She was like an inviolable goddess, high and mighty, looking down on all living beings. Besides Xian Yanjuan, there was a woman in her 20s. She was in her prime and was devastatingly beautiful. Although this woman didn't look like Xian Yanjuan or Xian Yanqing, she was still a rare beauty. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. This woman must be the other princess, Xian Yanlin. However, he did not see Xian Yanqing. It's such an important day, but he didn't let little Qing appear. He really doesn't treat little Qing as his own child. Lu Ming clenched his fists. Other than that, he also saw Xie Zhen and the 10th prince, Xie Yan. Lu Ming had not seen the other princes before. After the princes and princesses, there were a few concubines, nobles and officials, as well as some powerful cultivators of the ancient Saint dynasty. Thousands of people stepped into the air and landed on the platform. The sage emperor has descended. Guests, please take your seats. It was the same voice again, spreading throughout the entire sacred city. The person who transmitted the voice was definitely a supreme being level figure. As soon as he finished speaking, a loud laugh was heard. Haha, is our Inyang Palace the first one to arrive? A burly white-haired old man wearing a robe with the Inyang fish pattern walked in the air with a group of people. This old man's aura was terrifying and his might suppressed the world. Emperor, this was another emperor. The Inyang sovereign and his disciples of the Inyang Palace have arrived. The voice rang out and spread throughout the sacred city. I wonder how many big shots will be coming today. Beside Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the rest were so excited that their eyes were shining. The Inyang Palace was also an overlord force in the central continent. It was as powerful as the Heavenly Sword sect. Brother Inyang, please sit. Xie Qitian raised his hand. Thank you, brother. The Inyang sovereign cupped his fists and led the experts of the Inyang Palace to a nearby table. The demon emperor of Mount Tianyao has arrived. Soon another big force arrived. It was the overlord force of the central continent, the Heavenly Demon Mountain. Similar to the Myriad Demon Valley of the Eastern Wilderness, they were both gathering places for demonic beasts, led by a demon emperor. Martial Emperor Yuexin and her disciples from the Floating Mountain sect have arrived. Cold Blood Hall. Heavenly Sun Palace. Following that, many overlords of the central continent arrived one after another. Each overlord force was personally led by an emperor. Soon more than a dozen emperors appeared on both sides of the platform in the sky. In the sacred city, countless people's eyes lit up as they looked at this scene in shock. The gathering of over a dozen emperors was too shocking and terrifying. How many years would it take for this to happen? It was too rare. Perhaps many sovereigns had gathered in the ancient city of Providence during the last Battle of Providence, but that had been in the ancient city of Providence, and ordinary people wouldn't have been able to see them. But now there were over a dozen sovereigns in front of everyone. As for supreme beings, there were even more of them. However, they were completely overshadowed by the brilliance of the emperor. A dozen sovereigns. What kind of power was this? If they joined forces, they could really destroy the world. The heaven-suppressing divine army's 100-battle martial emperor has arrived. Suddenly, a voice rang out, and the entire place fell silent. Everyone looked in the same direction. There was a middle-aged man in black armor walking over. Behind him was a group of people. Every one of them was wearing armor. Their aura was wild and their fighting spirit was soaring. Each of them was filled with an incomparably strong battle intent, as if they were ready for a great battle at any moment. Hiss, the people of the heaven-suppressing divine army are here. Some people gasped and discussed in low voices. In the central continent, the heaven-suppressing divine army was the only force that was as powerful as the ancient Saint dynasty. The heaven-suppressing divine army was the force that hated the ancient Saint dynasty the most. The heaven-suppressing divine army used to be the strongest army of the ancient Saint dynasty. There were many powerful cultivators in it, and they were invincible. Back then they had helped the ancient Saint dynasty suppress the world and everyone was afraid of them. It was known as heaven suppression, so one could imagine how powerful it was. However, the heaven-suppressing divine army chose to watch the battle 30,000 years ago. In the end, the royal Xie family suffered a great loss, and the heaven-suppressing divine army announced that they would leave the Xie family and dominate the world. Some people said that if the heaven-suppressing divine legion had joined the battle, the royal family and the Xie family would not have suffered such heavy losses. They would not have lost control of the world, and the situation in the central continent would not have become like it was now. Therefore, the royal Xie family regarded the heaven-suppressing divine army as a traitor and an enemy. In the past 30,000 years, the two sides had had many terrible wars. However, the strength of the two sides was almost the same, and each side had suffered losses, so neither side could do anything to the other. Yang Patian, one of the top 5 young warriors, was from the heaven-suppressing divine army. Some people had guessed that the heaven-suppressing divine army wouldn't come today, But unexpectedly, they came, and the one leading them was a famous and unparalleled martial emperor. Xie Qitian's eyes glowed as he stared at the battle martial emperor. "Today we are guests. Please sit." "You're welcome," the 100 Battles martial emperor said in a carefree manner, and led his men to a seat at the side. "The third underworld emperor of the southern underworld has arrived. The western desert's indestructible Buddha emperor has arrived. Northern Plains expert has arrived. The supreme from the eastern barren territories Empyrean God Palace, the Heavenly Corpse Sect, and the Sky Demon Valley have arrived." Then announcements were made. In the south, an emperor of the underworld of the southern underworld was approaching with a group of experts. In the west, there was an old monk with a benevolent smile on his face. He was wearing a simple kasaya and his body was covered in golden light. A wheel of Buddhist light appeared above his head. This was a Buddha, also known as the Buddha Emperor. He was an emperor. As for Northern Plains and Eastern Barren, there were no emperors. Oh. Because Northern Plains was the same as the Eastern Barren territory, there were several large forces occupying it. They fought each other and the emperor could not leave easily, otherwise, the enemy might take advantage of the situation. Wang Shengtian, the patriarch of the Wang family, and the patriarch of the Jiang family. Lu Ming's eyes moved. Chapter 1113. 1113 Chapter 1113 Big Move. There were two people from the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace leading the group. They were the clan heads of the Wang clan and the Jiang clan respectively. Oh, the Heavenly Corpse Sect and the Heavenly Demon Valley, each had two supreme martial artists leading them. Everyone took their seats, and then some smaller forces, such as the Valley of the Medicine Masters, who did not have a sovereign, also came and took their seats on both sides. Of course, those who could sit on the seats were all forces with a reputation. At the very least, they had supreme martial artists sitting on the seats. The forces that were smaller were not qualified to sit on the seats. After half an hour, all of them arrived. "Let the sacrifice begin." As the voice fell, the huge altar began to glow. Endless light bloomed, covering the entire holy city. Xie Qitian stepped out and climbed the 99 stone steps to the altar. The royal family and the Xie family, as well as the nobles and ministers, all had solemn expressions as they faced the altar. As for all the powerful figures of the divine wilderness continent, they all stood up. The first offering is to offer sacrifice to the first saint emperor since ancient times. Xie Qitian spoke and bowed towards the altar. Sacrifice not to the heavens, only to the ancestors. Martial artists were originally going against the heavens and taking lives from the heavens. Naturally, they would not offer sacrifices to the heavens. The first saint emperor since ancient times. In the royal family, all the nobles and ministers followed Xie Qitian and bowed. As for the people from the other forces, they only looked on and did not bow. If it had been 30,000 years ago, they would naturally have to pay their respects. However, at this point, the major forces no longer had any reverence in their hearts. It was already good enough that they could come. Naturally, no one would pay their respects with the royal family. Just as Xie Qitian and the others bowed, a beam of light shot up into the sky from the altar. Then a statue emerged. This statue was the first saint emperor of the ancient Saint dynasty 1,000,000 years ago. He was also the one who had founded the ancient Saint dynasty. After that, Xie Qitian paid his respects to the second saint emperor in history. At the same time, another statue appeared. This was the second saint emperor of the ancient Saint dynasty. Following that, the ritual continued. On the altar, statues appeared one after another. They were all statues of the saint emperors of the ancient Saint dynasty. A terrifying aura emanated from the altar. It was as if all the previous saint emperors had been revived. In the end, there were a total of 108 statues on the altar, representing the 108 saint emperors who had passed away. The ancient Saint dynasty had been around for 1,000,000 years, and there had been more than 100 of them. There's no statue of the previous sage emperor. Is the previous sage emperor really still alive? Someone saw through the trick. Indeed, there was no statue of the previous sacred emperor. If the previous sacred emperor had already passed away, then his statue would definitely appear here. However, the fact that it didn't appear now meant that the previous sacred emperor was still alive. Many emperors of the overlord forces had a serious look in their eyes. Although the royal Xia family had weakened and could not be compared to 30,000 years ago, they were still not to be underestimated. Their strength was astonishing. That old man is still here. The 100-battle martial emperor of the heaven-suppressing divine army sneered. The sacrifice is over. Now give me the wine and the pills. Let's go. Xie Qitian's voice rang out. With a wave of his hand, the space cracked open, and the huge altar disappeared into the crack. Then, tables and chairs appeared where the altar had been. The royal family, the Xie family, and the ministers all sat down. Give me wine and pills. A voice reverberated through the entire area. Heavenly music began to play again, and at the same time, large cauldrons appeared in the palace. These cauldrons were as large as mountains, and beneath them were burly, naked men. Each of them was carrying a cauldron as they strolled through the air. Bang! Bang! These cauldrons seemed to be extremely heavy. With every step the burly men took, the space trembled, creating circles of space ripples. At a glance, there were a total of 108 burly men carrying 108 cauldrons that were as large as mountains. They stepped on the air and appeared in the sky above the sacred city. After the 108 burly men, there were 108 young women. They wore light veils and had graceful curves. Each of them was a beautiful woman with peerless beauty. Each of the 108 beautiful women was holding a purple gold gourd. You've been bestowed with spirit wine and spirit pills. Hurry up and snatch more. The eyes of Tai Xing and the others lit up as they stared at the sky. Pour. A voice was heard. Let's go. The brawny men shouted. They turned the cauldron and poured the wine down. Instantly, spiritual wine poured out of the cauldron. Each of the cauldrons was as big as a mountain, and it was unknown how much spirit wine they contained. At this moment 108 cauldrons fell at the same time, as if 108 waterfalls were falling from the sky. It was a spectacular sight. Moreover, these were all spiritual wines, not ordinary wines. They were refined from spiritual herbs, and were very useful for the cultivation of martial artists. Walala! The spirit wine fell from the sky, and the rich aroma of the wine filled the entire sacred city. One could be intoxicated by it with just a sniff. Haha, it's mine. I also want one. In the sacred city, countless martial artists rushed into the sky and used their means to draw the spiritual wine to their side. During this process, one could obtain the spirit wine through various means, but one could not attack or kill others. Otherwise, one would be killed without mercy. This was the rule. No one made a move on others. No one killed each other. They only used their own methods to obtain the spiritual wine. Who? Lu Ming opened his mouth and took a deep breath. There seemed to be a vortex in his mouth. The spiritual wine in the sky gathered into a stream and he swallowed it. As the wine entered his mouth, it immediately turned into a warm current that circulated through his body, making him feel very comfortable. This spirit wine's medicinal effects are not of much use to me. Lu Ming smiled and stopped snatching. Although this spirit wine was not of much use to spirit god martial artists, it was definitely very useful to those below the spirit god realm. Moreover, the lower the cultivation, the greater the effect. Those in the spiritual ocean and king's realm would definitely be able to increase their cultivation and condense true yuan. 108 cauldrons as large as mountains were filled with an unknown amount of spiritual wine. They filled the sky as if there was an endless supply. A heavy rain of spirit wine poured down on the entire sacred city. However, not a single drop fell to the ground. All of them had been collected by someone using true qi. Very quickly, not a single drop of spirit wine was left in the sky. Bestow the pill. Then the voice sounded again. The 108 beautiful women pulled out the lids of their gourds and poured them down. Suddenly, pills poured out of the gourd and scattered all over the sacred city. While the gourds didn't seem large, their storage space was like a storage ring. Countless pills were stored in them, and they poured down to the ground in an endless stream. Countless people's eyes lit up, and they used all their strength to collect the medicinal pills. Lu Ming waved his hand and more than 10 pills were caught in his hand. Lu Ming took a glance and realized that these pills were not of much use to him. However, they were quite useful to those below the spiritual god level. There were all kinds of pills, including those for healing, true essence recovery, detoxification, and cultivation. The number of such spiritual pills was terrifying. Chapter 11:14. 11:14. How old are you? What a big move. Oh, Lu Ming sighed. Even though the spiritual wine and the pills were not of a high grade, there was a huge amount of them. When such a terrifying amount was added together, the value was also very huge. The royal family and the Xie clan had also put in a lot of effort and capital for this sacrificial ceremony. Obviously, the royal family had been preparing for this for a long time. Otherwise, it was impossible for them to take out such a large amount of spirit wine and spirit pills at once. In the air, the people of the major forces watched with faint smiles. Not long after, the pills in the gourds were all poured out. The strong men and women carried the cauldrons and gourds and flew back to the palace. After that, young girls carrying all kinds of delicacies and wine flew out of the palace and placed them in front of the people of the major forces. Ha ha ha! Today marks the 100,000th year since the establishment of the Holy Dynasty. Thank you all for coming here and spending this day with me. Come, let me toast you all. Xie Qiqian picked up his wine cup and drank with the various major forces. Following that, Xie Qiqian continued, I believe everyone has heard of it. I have the intention to choose a young man to be my daughter's husband. Furthermore, all the talents from the divine wilderness continent's 5 territories have gathered here. Let's have a competition. No matter if it's a woman or not, she can participate. The first place winner will become Nianlin's husband. Of course, if the woman wins first place, Nianlin's husband will be pushed back by 1 place. At the same time, I promise to fulfill one of the conditions of the second and third place winners. As long as it's within my means, I'll do anything I can. In addition, I'll be allowed to enter the Saint Emperor's ancient hall to meditate and cultivate. Those ranked 4th to 10th will also be able to enter the ancient Saint Emperor Hall. They're here. As soon as Xie Qiqian said that, many people's eyes lit up. The most anticipated segment of the day had finally arrived. Xie Qiqian's offer was too tempting, and not many people could resist it. Today, all of the divine wilderness continent's elites were gathered together. There would definitely be an exciting battle. The Battle of Providence had taken place in the ancient city of Providence, and not many people had seen it. As such, not many people knew how exciting it was. But today he could see it. Moreover, not only were the Heaven's favorites from Central Continent here today, the Heaven's favorites from Southern Nether, Western Desert, Northern Plains and Eastern Barren were all gathered here, and there would be an even more brilliant spark. Most importantly, many of the top geniuses had entered the spiritual god realm, and were about to fight for the most powerful position in the spiritual god realm. This was undoubtedly something that everyone looked forward to. Especially many young Heaven's favorites, they were all rubbing their fists, ready to show off their skills. Brother Xia, how should we compete? The Yinyang Emperor of the Yinyang Palace asked. There are too many Heaven's favorites here today. We can't compete with them one by one. First of all, they have to be below 30 years old. Then they have to pass a round of selection. Only those who pass the selection can enter the official competition. Let's go, Xie Qiqian said. With a wave of his hand, 18 paths formed by rainbow light appeared in the south of the platform. They spread out in a fan shape and were hundreds of miles long. To the north of the platform there were tables and chairs on the east and west sides, and they were all filled with people. Only the south side of the platform had always been empty. Xie Qiqian must have had his plans in mind. The selection is very simple. Everyone who passes this path will be considered to have passed. Xie Qiqian said. Passing through this path is considered a pass. The hearts of many moved as they looked at the 18 paths with grave expressions. Since it was a selection, it definitely wouldn't be that simple. There would definitely be obstacles on the way. Those who want to participate, enter through that door. With a wave of Xie hand, a huge door appeared at the end of the 18 paths. From the imperial family's side, experts flew towards the door and stood guard on both sides. Only by entering that door could one participate in the selection. Let's go. I'm going. Instantly, young figures flew out from the major forces. There were also young figures flying out of the sacred city towards the door. Haha. This commander is leaving. Lu Ming smiled at Taixing and the rest. You're going too? Commander, the sage emperor said that only those below 30 years old can participate. How old are you? Taixing and the rest looked at Lu Ming with suspicion. Lu Ming had a full beard. No matter how one looked at him, he did not look like he was below 30 years old. He was at least close to 40 years old. Furthermore, martial artists aged very slowly. Lu Ming's actual age could be hundreds of years old. Lu Ming actually wanted to participate. If he was caught making up the numbers, he would not be able to bear the consequences. Hey, what's with your expressions? I'm not even 30 years old. Lu Ming looked at Taixing and the rest in disdain. Then he strode towards the big door. No, not even 30 years old? Taixing and the dozens of law enforcement soldiers all had their eyes wide open and their mouths wide open. Their jaws were almost dislocated, and it was simply unbelievable. Lu Ming swaggered to the main entrance. At this moment, there was already a long line at the gate. Lu Ming stood in line at the back. Then, who was that? That big bearded man, he's already so old, but he's still going to line up? Isn't that the overpowered commander? What was he doing? Didn't you hear the sage emperor say that only those under 30 can participate? This weird commander is really audacious. Just wait and see. He'll definitely be chased away later. Some people noticed Lu Ming and immediately started to discuss. Lu Ming could not be bothered with the gazes from the surroundings. He lined up leisurely. Very soon it was Lu Ming's turn. Stop, what are you doing here? Hurry up and run. A burly man who was guarding the door stopped Lu Ming. What are you doing? I'm here to take part in the competition. Lu Ming glared at him. A competition? The sage emperor has ordered that no one above 30 is allowed to participate. How old are you? How dare you ignore the sage emperor's orders? You're courting death. The burly man shouted angrily, his aura overbearing. Haha. This weird commander is finished. He dares to ignore the sage emperor's order. The commotion here naturally attracted the attention of everyone present. Nonsense. Which eye of yours saw that I'm over 30 years old? Let me tell you, I'm not even 30 yet. I'm just a little older. Don't judge a book by its cover. Lu Ming said casually. This stunned many people, and then they burst into laughter. Lu Ming did not look like he was under 30 years old. He was definitely over 30 years old. This guy was clearly trying to sneak in. Many people thought so. You get out of my way. Don't block the way. A cold voice came from behind Lu Ming. It was a woman's voice. It was pleasant to the ears, but it was cold and arrogant. Lu Ming turned around and saw a devastatingly beautiful woman. She was tall and slender, and her beauty was unparalleled. She was not inferior to deity Tanxiang, Jing Kongling, and the others. That's Lu Yusin, one of the 5 great beauties of Central Continent. Some people were discussing and looking at Lu Yusin excitedly. So it's Lu Yusin, one of the 5 great beauties of Central Continent. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat and he could not help but take a few more glances. Lu Yusin was indeed very beautiful. She was devastatingly beautiful like a dream. Just from her appearance, she was not inferior to the likes of Goddess Tanxiang and Jing Kongling. Chapter 1115. 1115 Chapter 1115 Kneeling down to eat dirt. Around Lu Yusin there were 3 or 4 young men. They were clearly Lu Yusin's flower guardians. Oh! Standing in the middle of the 3 flower guardians, Lu Yusin was like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon. She was extremely cold and arrogant. She glanced at Lu Ming indifferently, her eyes revealing a slight disdain like a proud white swan. Big Beard, what are you looking at? Are you even looking at Yusin? Why don't you take a piss and look into the mirror? You're already so old, yet you still want to sneak in and compete. Don't tell me you still want to marry Princess Nianlin? You're really a toad lusting after a swan's meat. Hurry up and get lost. Beside Lu Yusin, a few young men chided her one after another, acting all high and mighty. These few people had obviously come to the holy city later, and did not know about Lu Ming's impressive achievements. Where did these wild dogs come from? Don't they know the rules and keep barking? I'm here first, so I haven't entered yet. You guys line up for me, understand? Lu Ming glanced at the few of them indifferently, his eyes filled with contempt. What did you just say? You're looking for death. Trash. The young men's faces were ghastly pale. They berated him one after another. If not for the fact that they could not fight here, they would have killed Lu Ming long ago. Lu Yusin's expression was very ugly and gloomy. Clearly, Lu Ming's words just now had included her in his scolding. This piece of trash doesn't respect the sage emperor's orders. He's clearly older than the emperor, but he still wants to sneak in. I suggest that we kill him immediately as a warning to others. A red-robed young man was the most arrogant. What if I'm not older than him? Lu Ming gave him a sidelong glance. If you're not over 30 years old, I'll immediately kneel down and eat dirt. The red-robed young man shouted. He took a closer look at Lu Ming and was even more certain that Lu Ming's age could not be lower than 30. All right, I request to test my bone age. Lu Ming shouted loudly, his voice spreading far and wide. Approved, let him take the test. A dignified voice was heard. It was Xie Qitian. The sovereigns had naturally seen everything that had happened here. Yes. An old man flew out from beside Xie Qitian. With a wave of his hand, a mirror appeared. This is the bone measuring mirror. It can measure the age of your bones. The old man explained. Then, a beam of light shot out from the bone measuring mirror and enveloped Lu Ming. At that moment, almost all eyes were on Lu Ming. Could it be that Lu Ming was really not even 30 years old? That's impossible. He looks almost 40, but his actual age must be even older. Buzz. At this moment, the bone measuring mirror trembled and 25 round wheels appeared. They shone with a golden light and filled the sky. This was a bone wheel, and one wheel represented 1 year. On the bone measuring mirror, a round wheel of 25 appeared, representing Lu Ming's age. He was only 25. Moreover, the 25th wheel was not very bright. This meant that Lu Ming was still a little away from turning 25. The scene quieted down at once. Everyone looked at Lu Ming in bewilderment, their jaws almost dropping to the ground. Nest, he's not even 25 years old. This awesome commander is actually not even 25 years old. How is this possible? He looks like he's almost 40. He's growing too fast. It's really painful to the eyes. He's not even 25 years old. Doesn't that mean he belongs to the younger generation? He suppressed Wuxia before. The scene was in an uproar, but after the last sentence, the scene suddenly fell silent. That's right, he was less than 25 years old and belonged to the younger generation. The key was that he had suppressed Wuxia. If Lu Ming was in his 30s or 40s or even older, and he had suppressed Wuxia, it would not be a big deal. After all, he had been cultivating for many years. However, Lu Ming was in his 20s and was younger than Wuxia. It was a different story. This meant that this overpowered commander was a rare heaven's favorite, one that was even stronger than Wuxia. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This awesome commander was too awesome, and really exceeded everyone's expectations. It was not that no one had thought that Lu Ming was someone else in disguise. However, if he wanted to join the law enforcement army, he had to go through an identity check. He could change his appearance, but could his aura be changed too? This damned guy. Inside the door, Wuxia naturally saw this scene. He immediately gritted his teeth and wanted to bite Lu Ming. Some people from the Heavenly Martial Sword faction also had ugly expressions on their faces. They had suffered a great loss at the hands of this commander. Some of the sovereigns' eyes sparkled as they sized Lu Ming up curiously. Nest, the commander. He's only 25 years old? Tai Xing and the others were completely stunned. If the bone measuring mirror had not measured Lu Ming's bone age, they would still find it hard to believe. Behind Lu Ming, Lu Yusin and the other young men's eyes almost popped out. The red-robed young man in particular almost bit his tongue off. Can I go in now? Lu Ming looked at the burly man who was guarding the door. You can enter, haha. The burly man guarding the door smiled awkwardly. And you, what did you say just now? If I'm not even 30 years old, you'll have to kneel and eat dirt. Let's start now. Lu Ming's gaze fell on the red-robed young man as he said coldly. That? I was just casually saying it. The red-robed young man's face turned red in embarrassment. Your mother's fart. Lu Ming roared and glared at the young man. The beard on his face stood up and a powerful aura burst out, enveloping the young man in red. He scolded, what do you think this place is? All the emperors are here, and the sage emperor is on your seat. You actually dare to speak so casually in front of all the sage emperors? What do you take all the emperors for? Is this the person you're joking with? I think you want to die. Lu Ming's every word was like a huge hammer pounding on the red-robed young man's heart, causing his face to turn pale and bloodless. No, I didn't. You're talking nonsense. I didn't disrespect the emperors. The red-robed young man shook his head repeatedly, cold sweat dripping down his face. You're still denying it? Then do as you say. If you don't do it, I'll teach you. Lu Ming shouted. He moved and appeared in front of the red-robed young man all of a sudden. He pressed his big hand on the red-robed young man's shoulder. This red-robed youth was a third-grade heaven's favorite with a cultivation of great circle spirit embryo. He was worlds apart from Lu Ming and had no power to resist at all. Lu Ming pressed him down and he fell to the ground. Bang! After landing on the ground, the red-robed young man knelt down. Following that, Lu Ming pressed his head down on the ground. With a bang, the red-robed man's face smashed into the ground, causing it to shatter and his mouth to be full of dirt. Gulu! Many people in the surroundings suddenly swallowed their saliva and stared at Lu Ming with wide eyes. This awesome commander was really too overbearing. He really made the red-robed young man eat dirt. He really meant what he said. Impudent. On the west side of the platform, an old man from a large force slammed the table and shouted angrily. This force was Cold Blood Hall, and the young man in red was one of its elites. Many Cold Blood Hall members glared at Lu Ming. Don't be impatient. Standing at the front of Cold Blood Hall was the Hall Master, Blood Emperor. He spoke indifferently. Chapter 11:16. 11:16 Too difficult. Just now, it was indeed the red-robed young man who said that if Lu Ming was below 30 years old, he would have to kneel and eat dirt. Everyone heard it, including the many emperors. Lu Ming had directly used the emperors to suppress the red-robed young man, and then attacked him. It would not be good for Cold Blood Hall to stand up for the red-robed young man. Oh, interesting. It's indeed interesting. You're very bold. Around the platform, some sovereigns spoke indifferently and looked at Lu Ming with interest. What a good appetite. He doesn't eat exotic food but likes to eat dirt. This is the first time I've seen this. Lu Ming muttered to himself. He stepped into the air again and went to the main entrance. His words almost made the Cold Blood Hall people vomit blood. Lu Yusin gritted her teeth and glared at Lu Ming with an ugly expression. The other young men beside Lu Yusin looked at Lu Ming with fear. The red-robed young man could not fight back at all in Lu Ming's hands, which shocked them. Little girl, why are you staring at me? Lu Ming's eyes swept across Lu Yusin's body. Then he laughed and walked through the door. Lu Yusin's eyes were red. She swore in her heart that if there was a chance, she would definitely make Lu Ming regret it. Lu Ming walked past the main door and came to the front of the 18 roads. Some of the elites sized him up curiously. They were all very curious. When did such a heaven's favorite appear? Slowly, more and more people crossed the gate and arrived in front of the 18 paths. In the end, there were no less than 500 people, all of whom were top heaven's favorites. Alright, let's begin. Remember, if you fly out or fall down this path, you'll fail. Xiaqitian's voice was heard. Buzz. Whoosh. Oh. Immediately there were people who rushed up. There was one person on each road. When they rushed onto the path formed by the rainbow light, a figure appeared on the road and attacked the heaven's favorites on the road. The palm print blasted out, and on the 18 paths, the 18 young men all roared angrily and were sent flying out of the range of the rainbow light path. Failed. In an instant all 18 young men had failed. That's the strength of the spiritual God. It's actually the strength of the spiritual God. There's a spiritual God blocking the way. How can we rush over? This is too difficult. Many people's expressions changed and became very ugly. There was actually a spirit God blocking the way. How could those youths in the spirit embryo realm possibly charge past? It seems that the screening part will eliminate many people. That's true. With the spiritual God in the way, how many people can break through? That's normal. The Sage Emperor also said that only the top 10 can enter the Sage Emperor's ancient palace. What can those spirit embryo realm prodigies do if they rush over? It's just to make up the numbers, so it's better to be eliminated earlier. Many people in the surroundings were in a heated discussion. On every path of rainbow light, there was a figure standing with his hands behind his back. Although they weren't real, they still gave off a powerful aura. As long as I rush over, I might have a chance, he thought. Someone's eyes flickered as he began to plan. Buzz. Whoosh. Oh. Then another 18 people rushed up. Boom. Boom. The 18 of them struck out with their palms at the same time. The power of their palms was like a stormy sea, continuous and endless. 17 of them were directly sent flying by the palm force and were eliminated. However, there was one person who was a third-class heaven's favorite. Moreover, he was a powerful figure among third-class heaven's favorites. His cultivation was infinitely close to that of a spiritual god. He took the palm strike head-on but was not sent flying. Instead, he seized the opportunity and aimed at an opening. He used a powerful movement technique and rushed over. He rushed past the figure's obstruction. Haha, I've made it. I've succeeded. The young man was ecstatic and ran forward. However, before he could feel happy, 3 more figures formed in front of him. Each of the 3 figures was at the first level of the spiritual god realm. 3 powerful palm forces rushed toward the young man. You can't play like this. The young man shouted and was sent flying by the powerful palm force. Oh. 3 spiritual gods, how are we going to pass this? Many people sighed. It was already very difficult to pass even one, and now there were 3 more on the road ahead. How could they possibly pass? It's almost impossible to pass without reaching the spiritual god stage. Someone shook his head. However, there were still people who didn't give up and wanted to try. The facts proved that every path was the same. At the start there was a first-level spiritual god realm figure, and behind it there were 3 first-level spiritual god realm figures. Of course, the strength of these figures was considered ordinary among the first-level spiritual god realm. Many people failed. Lu Ming saw that Bloodsword 1, Corpse Warrior, Dongfeng Yu of the Ditian Divine Palace, Ao2 and Feng Xian of the Heavenly Demon Valley had all failed one by one. Although their talents were considered top-notch in the Eastern Wilderness, they were considered ordinary in the vast Divine Wilderness. The first few batches of people did not succeed. In the 6th batch, a second-grade Heaven's favorite made his move. This person was Lu Ming's old acquaintance, Blood Luozi. Shui Luozi sent the first spiritual god flying with a single strike. He then charged forward and faced the 3 spiritual gods. However, it did not cause much trouble for Shui Luozi. He struck 3 times with his palms and forced the 3 spiritual gods back. Then he charged forward. What was shocking was that before Blood Luozi reached the finish line, more figures appeared on the road. This time there were 9 figures. 9 first-level spiritual god realm experts. Boom! 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 The 9 figures struck out with their palms at the same time. The 9 palms were connected, one after another, and the power of the palms was like an avalanche. Shui Luozi's face turned serious. Blood light burst out and condensed into a blood-red saber. He struck out continuously, breaking the 9 palm forces one by one. However, after one palm strike, the 9 figures struck out another palm. 9 palm prints gathered together again, erupting with terrible power. The 9 figures seemed to be connected to each other, and their cooperation was flawless. With a shrill cry, Shueluazi performed the bloodline fusion and turned into a blood-winged bat. It made a terrible sound wave and broke the palm force. Then its wings were like heavenly blades, cutting a figure in half. It rushed through the gap and flew forward. After passing through the 9 figures, there were no more obstacles behind him. His journey was smooth and Blood Luozi became the first person to reach the platform. Even so, it still made many people feel dejected. The difficulty was too great. With 9 first-level spiritual god realm existences joining forces, their powers stacked together, and were too powerful. Apart from those who had broken through to the spiritual god realm, who else below the spiritual god realm could charge through? However, among the younger generation, other than the second-grade geniuses, no one had broken through to the third grade. Sai, forget it. I don't have any hope. The difference is too big. Some people shook their heads and sighed, planning to give up. Indeed, there's no need to. There's no hope at all. There's no need to humiliate yourself. That's right. This time I'll just be a spectator. Many people spoke up and gave up. What a waste of time. At this moment a cold snort sounded, and a young man stepped out. This person was dressed in a black robe. His eyes were sinister, and his entire body was covered in black mist. He was abnormally cold, and the people standing beside him could not help but shiver. Chapter 1117. 1117. So many powerful heavens favorites. Southern Nether, Dark Child. Oh, someone said in a low voice, looking at this person with fear. Dark Child was said to be an existence equivalent to the 5 big shots of Central Continent. However, he had never fought with the people of the 5 big shots, so many people were skeptical. Each of the 5 overlords of the Central Continent was an era-suppressing genius. Not everyone could reach that level. Who would believe it without seeing it with their own eyes? Boom! Suddenly, Dark Child's aura skyrocketed, and a terrifying pressure filled the air. Then dash! Whoosh! Dark Child turned into a beam of light and rushed forward at a terrifying speed. In the first stage, the figure had just struck out with a palm force when Dark Child rushed past it. His body exploded immediately, not causing any hindrance to Dark Child. In the second round, the 3 figures attacked at the same time. Their palm prints were mighty, but the result was the same as the previous figure. Dark Child rushed through them and the 3 figures exploded. Dark Child's speed wasn't affected at all. It was as if the 3 spirit god powerhouses were air. Dark Child's figure was like a stream of light. In the third stage, the 9 figures couldn't stop Dark Child's figure at all. He was also rushed through and all 9 figures exploded. Buzz! Dark Child's figure appeared on the platform. CSI. Gasps could be heard at the scene. It was too powerful and terrifying. An ordinary first-level spiritual god realm expert was like an empty shell in front of Dark Child. He rushed past them. In the eyes of many people, Dark Child had just turned into a black stream of light. In a flash, he had arrived on the opposite side in a shockingly short time. It's too terrifying. This kind of strength far exceeds ordinary second-grade heavens favorites. He's definitely at the level of the 5 magnates. That's right. We'll watch this. The heavens favorites from the other territories will clash with the 5 magnates. It'll be very exciting. Dark Child's strength shocked everyone. Haha. Then I'll also set off. With a loud laugh, a young man in a golden robe stepped out. This person was dressed in gold, golden hair, golden clothes and golden battle boots. His body emitted golden rays of light, like a small golden sun. Lion City, one of the 5 giants. Someone recognized the young man. The Lion City came from the overlord, the Lion Tiger Hall. It was a demon race, and it was rumored that its true form was a golden lion. It had 90% of the bloodline of the divine beast, the divine sun lion, and was extremely powerful. Almost 90% of his bloodline had become a pure-blood sun divine lion. However, in the divine wilderness continent, There were almost no Khanate pure-blooded divine beasts. Those demon sovereigns only became pure-blooded after they broke through to the sovereign realm and underwent a transformation. However, this was a postnatal cultivation. There was still a huge difference between them and Khanate pure-blooded divine beasts. Lion capital, let's go together. As soon as Sherdu walked out, another young man in a 5-colored feather coat also stepped out. Everyone's heart jolted as they recognized this young man. Kong Lin, the supreme talent of the Overlord Force and the Myriad Demon Mountain. It was said that he had 90% of the bloodline of the Divine Beast 5 Elements Peacock, and was extremely powerful. They were also 2 of the 5 giants of Central Continent. Of the 5 giants of Central Continent, 3 were humans and 2 were demons. Kong Lin. Sherdu looked at Kong Lin and grinned. The 2 of them looked at each other and moved almost at the same time. A 5-colored ray of light and a golden ray of light each charged towards a path. Whoosh! Whoosh! Without any pause, a light flashed past. Just like Dark Child, the spirit god existences blocking their way were directly blasted apart. They didn't stop them in the slightest. In an instant, the 2 of them appeared on the opposite platform. The 5 magnates are really amazing. Many people sighed. This was the strength of the 5 magnates. Compared to them, ordinary Heaven's favorites were far too weak. Even many of the second-grade Heaven's favorites felt powerless. I'm coming. A Buddhist name that Lu Ming was very familiar with rang out. A baby-faced monk, who had been smiling all along, stepped out. This unscrupulous monk. Lu Ming pursed his lips. Amitabha. A clear Buddhist chant sounded. A petite figure in white clothes stepped forward and came to the road beside the unscrupulous monk. A female bodhisattva. What a beautiful female bodhisattva. Many people's eyes lit up. It was actually a nun. She was petite and dainty, wearing a pure white kasaya. Her body was filled with holy Buddhist light, like a female bodhisattva who had walked out of a painting. She was very beautiful. Even without her long black hair, she was still unparalleled and holy. People couldn't move their eyes away from her after one look. It's a pity that such a beautiful woman, no less beautiful than the 5 great beauties, is actually a female bodhisattva. Sigh. Many people sighed with regret. Hehe, the 2 bald donkeys of the western desert are about to attack. Let me accompany you. With a sneer, a black-robed young man covered in black flame stepped out and appeared on the other road. Someone recognized him as one of the southern netherworld's chosen. Bang! Bang! On the other side, 2 tall figures stepped out at the same time, attracting everyone's attention. Yang Patian and Tuoba Shur of Northern Plains. Haha, it's really lively. I'll go then. The monk laughed as Buddhist light emanated from his body. With a flash of light, he charged forward. At the same time, the others also moved. They turned into rays of light and rushed forward. On the way, the figures of the spiritual gods were practically non-existent. In the next moment, on the opposite platform, Yang Patian, Tuoba Shur, the unscrupulous monk, the female bodhisattva, and the young man covered in black flames all arrived at the same time. Almost everyone was shocked. How is this possible? There are so many Heaven's favorites from the 5 magnates? Many people gasped and stuttered in disbelief. Yang Patian had long been one of the 5 giants of the Central Continent. No one was surprised by this. As for Tuoba Shur, he had fought with Yang Patian several times and his name had long spread throughout the Central Continent. As for the unscrupulous monk, his performance in the secret realm of the Sage Mansion of the World College had also spread, and everyone also regarded him as a Heaven's pride on the level of the 5 giants. These 3 people were as expected. However, the female bodhisattva and the young man covered in black flames were also so powerful. It was shocking. Don't tell me these 2 people also have the strength of the Big 5. How can we compete then? The top 10 spots are almost taken up. Many people sighed. First it was Dark Child, then Lion Capital Kong Lin, and this time there were 5 people. With such unfathomable existences, there were a total of 8 people. There were not many spots left. Then many second-grade Heaven's favorites started to step out. Now, almost all of the second-grade geniuses had stepped into the spiritual god realm. This test was naturally not difficult for them. The second-grade heaven's favorites all passed by. Lu Ming saw Goddess Tanxiang, Jing Kongling, Kong Xian, Junyu Divine Emperor, and some others that he did not recognize. This time, most of the Divine Wilderness Continent's elites were here. Other than a few Heaven's Pride experts from the Imperial family and the Xie family, most of the Heaven's Pride experts had participated. Chapter 1118. 1118 The 40 people who passed. At this moment, an ordinary-looking young man stepped out. Oh, this young man was really ordinary. His appearance was ordinary, and his body was also ordinary. He had a medium build, and his face was very calm. He didn't have an overbearing arrogance, nor did he have the noble and overbearing aura of a king. He was just like an ordinary young man. However, the moment this young man walked out, he attracted everyone's attention. Even the sovereigns turned their gazes over. That was because the young man was Long Chun. Long Chun was a well-known name in the Central Continent. He was the overlord of the Central Continent's younger generation. No one could defeat him. All along the way, he had never tasted defeat among his peers. During the Battle of Providence, he had already entered the spiritual god realm, leading the other four magnates by a large margin. He was known as a heaven's favorite that only appeared once in 100,000 years in Central Continent. No one said anything. Everyone's eyes were on Long Chun, waiting to see how he would react. Bang! Long Chun took a step forward. That's right, it was just an ordinary step and then another. Just like that, he took one step at a time and walked forward step by step. One step covered several miles. His speed wasn't fast. Let alone Yang Patian and the others, he wasn't even as fast as a second-grade heaven's favorite. He took a few steps forward and arrived in front of the first figure. The figure struck out with his palm, and Long Chun did the same. With a bang, the figure exploded. Then, Long Chun continued to move forward. Very quickly, they arrived at the second stage. In front of the three figures, he also struck out with his palm, and the three figures exploded. Then he continued to step forward and came to the third stage. He waved his palm again and the 9 figures exploded at the same time. It seemed very easy, like the clouds and the wind. Then he stepped onto the platform. The speed of his stride wasn't fast, but the speed at which he passed the level was very fast. Those figures couldn't stop him at all. Therefore, in general, he had surpassed most of the second-grade heaven's favorites. This person is unfathomable. Lu Ming stared at Long Chun and realized that he could not see through him at all. I'll go too. Lu Ming smiled and stepped out. He randomly chose a path and rushed forward. Lu Ming's performance was not too amazing. Although he also cleared the level at an extremely fast speed, his speed was only average among the second-grade prodigies and he did not cause too much of a shock. As Lu Ming could suppress Wuxia previously, it was normal for him to have such a result. The others were not surprised. After Lu Ming, a few other second-grade geniuses followed. After the second-grade heaven's favorites finished, no one else tried. The remaining third-grade heaven's favorites, and even the weaker ones, all shook their heads. They didn't need to try because it was impossible for them to pass. Alright, the selection is over. Let's go, Xie Qitian said. With a wave of his hand, the 18 rainbow paths disappeared. At the scene, everyone's eyes fell on the platform. On the platform there were a total of 40 people. In other words, there were only 40 people who passed the selection. Naming is really powerful. He has 2 people who are suspected to be on the same level as the 5 magnates and 3 second-grade heaven's favorites. Northern Plains is also very powerful. Other than Tuo Bashir, there are also 3 second-grade heaven's favorites. I feel that the Western Desert is the most unfathomable. There are 2 people who are suspected to be big shots, but not a single second-grade heaven's favorite. That's not realistic. I think even the second-grade heaven's favorites aren't here, so I can't see their depths at all. Indeed, the Western Desert has always been unfathomable, and has a long history. No one knows how many years ago the Western Desert Saint Monk appeared. Speaking of which, the East Continent is really embarrassed. Only one emperor god passed the handsome selection. Haha. Many people were discussing it. Lu Ming looked around and it was true. Without a doubt, the Central Continent had the most people. Apart from him, there were 27 people. 5 from Southern Nether, 4 from Northern Plains, and 2 from Western Desert, but the 2 from Western Desert had unfathomable strength. In the East Baron, there was only the Emperor God. The Eastern Baron territory? Li Lai is the weakest in the Forsaken Land, so how can there be any prodigies? It's already good enough that they have an Emperor God. I heard that there's also a person called Lu Ming who's above the Emperor God realm, but he didn't come. No, he didn't. I'm afraid he has declined, so he doesn't dare to come. He used to be stronger than an Emperor God, but now he's probably even weaker than an Emperor God. You're right. Let's not talk about the East Continent. The crowd discussed and expressed their opinions, but when the Eastern Baron territory was mentioned, they all looked contemptuous. In the crowd, Shuejiani, Ao2 Dongfangyu, and the others gritted their teeth as they listened. But in his heart he felt helpless. The Eastern Baron territory was indeed the weakest. This was an indisputable fact. They used to be the top figures in the East Continent. They were confident that they could make a name for themselves in the Central Continent. But ever since he came to Central Continent, he had suffered a huge blow. There were too many people in the Central Continent who were stronger than them. Even the Emperor God was only a second-grade heaven's favorite. This made them feel dejected. I wonder what kind of reputation Lu Ming will make if he comes to the Central Continent. I guess he'll only be suppressed and won't be able to cause much trouble. At that moment, Bloodsword 1 Dongfangyu Ao2 and the rest remembered Lu Ming. However, they felt that even if Lu Ming were to come, he would not be as good as an Emperor God. The Supreme Emperor had comprehended the will of space and was extremely powerful. In the Battle of Providence, the Supreme Emperor's will of space was still weak, but it would become stronger and stronger as time went on. They believed that the current Emperor God had already surpassed Lu Ming. Alright, a total of 40 people. Let's begin the first round of competition. The rules of the first round are very simple. I've recorded the time you took to pass the selection. Now, I'll divide you into 2 groups according to the time you took to clear the trial. The shorter the time, the better the results. The top 20 will be in one batch, and the last 20 will be in another. The rule of the first round is that the last 20 will challenge the top 20. If they succeed, they will advance directly. If they fail, they will be eliminated. Furthermore, everyone can only challenge once. The one being challenged can only accept one challenge. Xie Qitian announced. What? The bottom 20 will challenge the top 20? Many people's expressions changed. Without a doubt, Yang Patian, Shurdu, and the others took the shortest amount of time. The challenge could only accept one challenge. This meant that there was definitely someone who wanted to challenge Yang Patian. In that case, wouldn't Shurdu and the others lose for sure? Now, I'll announce the names of the last 20 people. Wuxia Bloodluozi. Xie Qitian announced the names of the last 20, and the people who were called had rather unsightly expressions. At the same time, they began to size up the 20 people who had not been named. I didn't expect to enter the top 20. Lu Ming smiled faintly. Other than him, the second-grade geniuses that Lu Ming knew, such as the Sandalwood Fairy, Jing Kongling, Di Shun, and Wu Changkong, had all entered the top 20. On the other hand, Kong Xian, Junyu, and the others were in the last 20. Lu Yusin was also in the last 20, and her expression was rather unsightly. The 20 at the back were sizing up the 20 at the front and choosing their opponents. Chapter 1119. 1119 Chapter 1119 Battling Lu Yusin. Yang Patian, Shurdu, Kong Lin, and Long Chun were directly ignored by them. Oh. He also ignored people like Tuoba Shi and the unscrupulous monk. Challenging them would be no different from admitting defeat. In addition, emperor gods who have grasped the concept of space are also excluded. Wu Changkong, who had always been at the top of the second-grade heaven's favorites, was also excluded. There were also a few other people who were unfathomable. There were also the two magnificently beautiful goddesses, Tanxiang Fairy and Jing Kongling. They were the targets of many people's pursuit. Of course, no one would challenge them. There were only a few people left. Many people's gazes swept between Lu Ming and the other two. Although Lu Ming had defeated Wucong before, Wucong was considered weak among the second-grade talents. Moreover, Lu Ming had used a treasure to block the attack of a fourth-level spiritual god previously. However, in such a situation, he would naturally not let you use a treasure to win. You would still have to rely on your own strength. Therefore, Lu Ming was undoubtedly one of the best targets to challenge. Before we start, I'll make 2 points. First, this is only a competition, so you can't kill your opponent. Second, you can't rely too much on external objects. You have to rely on your own strength. Xie Qitian announced. You big beard, I challenge you. What are you doing? That big bearded man is mine. All of you get lost. He's mine. As soon as Xie Qitian finished his sentence, a few people had their eyes on Lu Ming, wanting to challenge him. Nest, do you all think I'm easy to bully? Lu Ming's eyes were filled with ferocity as he swept his gaze over the few of them. Wait a minute. It's too chaotic to challenge like this. Let's do it according to the results. Those with good results in the last 20 can have the priority to challenge. Xie Qitian's voice was heard, and the entire place fell silent. Then, an old man walked out and reported the names of the last 20 people. The more they reported, the uglier their expressions became. Those with good results could challenge first, so they would definitely challenge the weaker ones. In other words, the one who stayed until the end would definitely be the strongest. For example, who would challenge Longchan, Yang Patian, and the others? Those who were ranked lower would definitely encounter Yang Patian and the others. How could their expressions be good? Now let's begin. Xie Qitian announced after the ranking was announced. I'll go first. Lu Yusin stepped out. Her result was the best among the last 20 people. She had almost charged into the top 20. She swept her gaze across the room and eventually landed on Lu Ming. A cold glint flashed across her eyes as she said, Big beard, I challenge you. Previously, Lu Ming did not give her any face and even suppressed the cold blood hall's talent in front of everyone. In Lu Yusin's opinion, this was a slap to her face. She had long wanted to teach Lu Ming a lesson. Now that she had such a chance, how could she miss it? Little girl, you want to challenge me? Just like I said before, be careful or I'll beat you up. Lu Ming grinned, his gaze sweeping across a certain part of Lu Yusin. You're looking for death. Lu Yusin's expression was ugly. This guy is really looking for death. One of the big 5, Lion Capital, emitted a cold light and killing intent from his eyes, causing the people standing beside him to shiver. In the central continent, everyone knew that the Lion Capital had always been Lu Yusin's pursuer. Since Lu Ming dared to tease Lu Yusin like this, it was obvious that the Lion Capital had its eyes on him. Lu Yusin challenged Lu Ming. The others retreated and stood at the edge of the platform. Only Lu Ming and Lu Yusin were standing opposite each other on the platform. If I don't beat you up until you beg for mercy, my name isn't Lu Yusin. Lu Yusin's beautiful eyes were filled with coldness. She had enough confidence to defeat Lu Ming. This was because she hadn't used her full strength when she was screening. Buzz. All of a sudden, Lu Yusin moved and pounced toward Lu Ming. The strange thing was that as Lu Yusin rushed out, her figure actually increased in number. One split into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. In the end, the platform was filled with Lu Yusin's silhouettes. There were hundreds of them, and they were densely packed, surrounding Lu Yusin. This is the illusionary demon movement technique of the illusionary sect. Lu Yusin has actually cultivated it to this level. It's truly shocking. At the edge of the platform, a second-grade Heaven's favorite recognized this movement technique and revealed a serious expression. How could they resist when hundreds of figures appeared all at once? Lu Yusin's combat strength was considered to be in the upper tier, even among the second-grade Heaven's favorites. Illusionary demon finger. With a delicate shout, the hundreds of figures stretched out their hands at the same time. Her slender fingers were more powerful than divine weapons. They pierced through the void and tried to kill Lu Ming. Whoosh! Whoosh! From all directions, the finger force was aimed at Lu Ming's vital points. A black long spear appeared in Lu Ming's hands. Minglu was from the Black Spear sect, so he had bought a black spear, a medium lever 8 spiritual weapon, some time ago. Buzz! Whoosh! Oh! The long spear shook, and a black spear flower condensed in the air and flew toward the finger force. Bang! Bang! A wave of dense collision sounds rang out, and the spear flowers and finger forces disappeared one after another. Buzz! Then the black spear's radiance expanded and swept out with the momentum of sweeping away thousands of troops. However, Lu Yusin's movement technique was indeed impressive. In the face of such an attack, hundreds of figures floated on the platform, flashing and avoiding Lu Ming's long spear. Let's see how many shots you can dodge. Lu Ming held the long spear in his hand and continuously swept it out. The spear's gleam was like a black dragon, surging violently on the huge platform and enveloping the entire platform. Although Lu Yusin's movement technique was strong, on such a platform, its power was greatly reduced. Soon she couldn't avoid it. One by one, her figure was hit by the spear light and dissipated. Humph! Humph! Lu Yusin snorted coldly. She didn't retreat but advanced instead. Her figure flickered non-stop, and she was incredibly fast. Lu Ming's spear was like a dragon, but he could not hit him. As she neared Lu Ming, a cloud of gray fog appeared above Lu Yusin's head. On the gray fog there were 8 golden chakras. This was Lu Yusin's bloodline. Great dream of spring and autumn. At that moment, Lu Yusin turned into a cloud of gray mist. The gray mist expanded rapidly and enveloped Lu Ming. When Lu Ming was enveloped by the gray fog, the surrounding world suddenly changed. Boom! The earth shook violently. Lu Ming saw that a brutal battle was taking place in front of him. Talisman Amulet Sect. Lu Ming was greatly shocked. In front of them was the Talisman Amulet Sect. At this moment, the yin and yang formation of the Talisman Amulet Sect had been broken. The army of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace was swarming in and killing their way into the yin and yang mountain. At this moment, both sides were engaged in a bloody battle. He saw Yin Kuangtu, the 9 Sons Supreme, being killed by Martial Emperor Di, by Shijin Du Songjue, and the others had died at the hands of the supreme martial artists of the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace. His parents, his disciples, and his friends had all been turned into ashes in the bloody battle. Illusion, illusion, this is an illusion. Lu Ming took a deep breath, his eyes glimmering. In the secret realm of the Saint Mansion, he had once entered an illusion created by a being that surpassed the emperor level and almost lost himself. Compared to that illusion, this one was too fake. How could it confuse Lu Ming? Lu Ming slowly closed his eyes. Chapter 1120. 1120 Red Eyes from Envy. At this moment the paragons, the emperors, supremes, and many other powerful cultivators, including those in the air and in the sacred city, were all staring at the platform. Oh! He looked at Lu Ming's figure, which was shrouded in gray fog. It's Lu Yusin's great dream of spring and autumn. That guy called Minglu is finished. He's been enveloped by the great dream of spring and autumn. The outcome has been decided. That's right. Once Lu Yusin's great dream of spring and autumn is used, the only thing one can do is to retreat. Once enveloped, one will fall into an endless illusion. Even the top 5 young warriors will be in danger. Lu Yusin has won. A few of the second-grade heaven's favorites were discussing. They knew how terrifying Lu Yusin's dream was. This was Lu Yusin's bloodline secret technique, which was very mysterious and unpredictable. After that, no one said anything. They just waited quietly. In the gray fog, Lu Ming's eyes were tightly shut. However, it was only 2 minutes before he suddenly opened his eyes. Let's end this. The corners of Lu Ming's mouth curled into a smile. He shouted softly and the scene of the talisman sex battle in front of him suddenly froze. Then it shattered like a mirror and turned into nothingness. Lu Ming was still standing on the platform. The gray fog surrounded him. Break! Lu Ming's palm was like a sword. The five-colored will burst forth and he struck down. Boom! The earth shook and the gray fog rolled. It was constantly being destroyed by Lu Ming's essential core. In the next moment, Lu Ming took a step forward and rushed in one direction. He grabbed with his claws and a terrifying force suddenly exploded. In this direction, the gray fog was obliterated, and Lu Yusin's figure appeared. At this moment, her beautiful eyes were wide open, and her small mouth was open. Her face was full of disbelief. His vital essence condensed into a huge hand and grabbed Lu Yusin. Vital essence poured in and sealed all the major acupuncture points in Lu Yusin's body, making her unable to circulate her vital essence. As Lu Yusin was caught by Lu Ming, the surrounding gray fog dissipated. When the crowd saw this scene, they were stunned. Lu Yusin was defeated and captured. What happened? Earlier on, the gray fog had shrouded them. Many people did not see what had happened clearly, and thought that Lu Ming would definitely lose. However, they did not expect to see this scene after waiting for 2 minutes and the fog had dissipated. Some of the emperors and supreme martial artists' eyes flickered, but they didn't say anything. They had obviously noticed something. Let me go. Lu Yusin struggled with all her might in the Zhenyuan hand, but with his Zhenyuan sealed, how could he struggle with just his physical strength? Let you go? Hee, did I forget what I just said? Lu Ming grinned, his eyes darting around Lu Yusin's body. Lu Yusin shivered. She glared at Lu Ming and said, What are you trying to do? Of course I'm going to beat you up. Lu Ming's mouth cracked into a smile and his beard trembled. Don't you dare. Lu Yusin glared at Lu Ming. Her threat was obvious. You still dare to threaten me? You're looking for a beating. With a thought, he controlled his Zhenyuan and grabbed Lu Yusin. Then he slapped a certain part of Lu Yusin's body. Pa! A crisp sound reverberated throughout the entire area. Lu Ming's palm smacked heavily on it. Silence. The scene fell into a dead silence. Countless people stared at the scene with their mouths wide open. He hit Lu Yusin's taxi. After a long time, someone finally stammered, but after a long time he couldn't continue. They couldn't believe it. The unparalleled beauty, Lu Yusin, had actually been beaten in public. This was simply unbelievable. How could this Ming Lu have such courage? Lu Yusin was one of the 5 most beautiful women in the central continent. Of course, there were even more people who were envious regardless of whether they were young or old. Some people were so envious that their eyes turned red. She was one of the 5 great beauties of the central continent. They wanted to give her a slap and have a taste of her, but they didn't dare to. You're looking for death. Kill. A loud roar was heard as a terrifying killing intent burst forth. A golden light shot up into the sky. Shirdu looked at Lu Ming with killing intent, wishing he could tear Lu Ming into pieces. As everyone knew, all the lions had been pursuing Lu Yusin. Since Lu Ming dared to treat Lu Yusin like this, he naturally wanted to kill Lu Ming. At this moment, Lu Yusin was stunned. She widened her eyes and stared at Lu Ming in a daze. After a long while, she let out an earth-shattering scream. She was actually by Lu Ming in front of everyone. This way. She wished there was a crack in the ground and she could bury her head in it. You're dead. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Lu Yusin screamed and struggled with all her might. What are you shouting for? You dare to threaten me, hit me again. Lu Ming berated him and slapped him again. The crisp sound reverberated throughout the entire area. All the onlookers' eyes were about to explode, especially the men. They were so envious that their eyes turned red. Some of them were so excited that they were trembling. It was as if they had replaced Lu Ming to teach Lu Yusin a lesson. Commander! The commander! Tai Xing and the law enforcement army were completely speechless. They knew that Lu Ming was impressive, but this was too impressive. Even some of the emperors and supreme beings at the table felt their eyelids twitch and their hearts stir. Impudent. One of the supreme beings from the Tranquil Illusion sect couldn't take it anymore. He shouted, and the might of a supreme being filled the air. However, They were immediately stopped by the emperor of the Yohuan sect. Today was the million-year sacrificial ceremony of the ancient Saint dynasty, and all the powerful cultivators had gathered. Moreover, Lu Ming and Lu Yusin were having a fair battle on the battle stage. It was not appropriate for them to interfere. Ming, you're dead. The golden light on Lion City's body grew brighter, and a terrifying killing intent enveloped Lu Ming. What are you shouting for? Who are you? Shut up. Shut up. Lu Ming looked at Shurdu coldly and shouted. This made Shurdu furious and he almost rushed out to kill Lu Ming. In the end he held back. With all the emperors gathered here, he did not dare to break the rules. You still dare to threaten me? Lu Ming's gaze turned to Lu Yusin again. I'm going to kill you. Lu Yusin screamed. Pa! Another slap landed, and Lu Yusin's screams came to an abrupt end. As for the people who were watching, they were already numb. This overpowered commander was simply too overpowered and heaven-defying. He was completely lawless and audacious. I've never heard of this Minglu before. He appeared out of nowhere. First he suppressed Wu Cang. Now he's treating Lu Yusin like this. To be honest, I'm impressed. Said a heaven's favorite. He looked simple and honest. Everyone recognized him as a heaven's favorite from the Soldier King's residence. My hair is white, I am a little monk. I'm so envious. A Buddhist proclamation sounded. Everyone was stunned, because the person who said that he was envious was an unscrupulous monk. However, he was a monk. What was there to be envious of? Did he want to give it a try? Many people were speechless. Amitabha. The Buddha of the Western Desert called out the name of Buddha, seemingly embarrassed. Chapter 1121. 1121 Chapter 1121 Melee. Are you still threatening me? Oh. Lu Ming continued to look at Lu Yusin. Lu Yusin bit her lips tightly. This time she didn't dare to say anything. That's right. I've warned you twice before, but you didn't listen. You're just a little girl. I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your elders. Don't hold a grudge. I'm doing this for your own good. Lu Ming spoke with conviction, like an elder disciplining a junior. In addition to his long beard, he looked like he was almost 40 years old. He really did have that kind of taste. Lu Yusin could only glare at Lu Ming hatefully. She did not dare to say a word, but she could not wait to cut Lu Ming into 1,000 pieces. She hated it. In the future, when people saw her, they would definitely think of this big bearded man. Alright, that's all for today. Be more obedient in the future and don't be so arrogant. With that, Lu Ming waved his hand and Lu Yusin flew out. When she flew out of the platform, Lu Ming had already released the quintessential essence that was sealed in her body. Lu Yusin's body was filled with quintessential essence. She glanced at Lu Ming with killing intent, then flew toward the illusionary sex seat without saying a word. Ming Lu wins this battle. An elder from the royal Xie family announced. Lu Ming grinned and walked to the side of the platform. This big brother is amazing. This little monk is impressed. At the side, the unscrupulous monk put his hands together in front of his chest, his face full of admiration. This made the people around him feel extremely despondent. Was this monk really a holy monk from the Western Desert? Haha, master, you're too kind. Lu Ming said casually, but he did not dare to look down on this unscrupulous monk. He felt that this monk was unfathomable. Next, the competition continued. One of the southern underworld's geniuses stepped forward. His ranking was only second to Lu Yusin. This person chose a heaven's favorite who was slightly weaker. Unfortunately, he still failed and followed in Lu Yusin's footsteps. Next, the challenges continued one by one. The two people who came out later were both very powerful, and they both won. However, from the fifth challenge onwards, the challengers began to lose consecutively. Kong Xian had challenged Wu Changkong and was defeated. Wu Changkong's cultivation had reached the second level of the spiritual god realm. He must have made another breakthrough during this period. Two people challenged Goddess Tanxiang and Jing Kongling, but they both failed. Fairy Tanxiang had used her body to inscribe the formation. The killing formation within her body erupted and was extremely powerful. In addition to his pill refining and weapon transformation technique, his combat strength was astonishing. The pure sky spirit had comprehended 3 intents, and the fusion of the 3 intents was mysterious and unpredictable. Its combat power was also very strong, so it wouldn't be very difficult to defeat an opponent. Then, someone challenged the Emperor God. Space Will was indeed the king of will. The more he cultivated, the more powerful it became. In the end, Emperor God also defeated his opponent and kept his place in the top 20. Soon only Long Chan, Yang Patian, and the Heartless Monk were left. The remaining 9 people who had not challenged him had extremely ugly expressions. Some people were really unwilling to give up, and after picking and choosing they finally chose the unscrupulous monk. This guy doesn't look reliable, maybe his combat strength isn't strong. Then, the second great heaven's favorite who issued the challenge was sent flying off the platform by the unscrupulous monk. Winning in one move, the difference was too great. The remaining 8 sighed. They knew that there was no point in challenging him, so they all admitted defeat. Oh. The first round ended. There were 20 people left. The crowd turned to look at Xie Qitian, curious to know the rules of the next round. Was it going to be a one-on-one battle again? Let's decide the winner in the second round and the ranking in one fell swoop. The 20 of you will fight in a free-for-all on the platform. You can fight however you like, and the results will be calculated based on the time you stay on the platform. The longer you stay on the platform, the better the results will be. The top 10 and top 3 will be decided in the end, Xie Qitian said. Chaotic battle. Everyone was shocked. Xie Qitian had actually decided to use a free-for-all method, allowing the 20 supreme talents on the field to decide the winner in a free-for-all. The situation had become complicated. A chaotic battle was not a one-on-one battle. One could join forces or form an alliance. The situation was ever-changing. Now let's begin. Xie Qitian's voice reverberated throughout the entire area. Buzz. Whoosh. Oh. As soon as Xie Qitian's voice fell, a figure flashed on the platform, away from the people around him, and stared at the others cautiously. Because other than yourself, everyone else is an enemy, and you can't be sure who will suddenly attack you. Only Long Chan was calm and indifferent. He stood there casually, looking straight ahead as if he didn't care at all. On the platform, everyone looked at each other, and the atmosphere was extremely tense. Yang Patian, let's continue our battle. We must determine the winner today. A loud roar broke the silence. Tuobashir charged towards Yang Patian with his mace in hand. That's just what I want. I'll defeat you today. The heavenly halberd appeared in Yang Patian's hand. He took a step forward and charged towards Tuobashir. Boom! The Heaven Scorcher halberd and the Wolf-Tooth Club collided heavily. The space was directly torn apart, and a terrifying force swept in all directions. Third level of the spiritual god realm. Lu Ming's gaze flickered. Yang Patian and Tuobashir's cultivation had indeed broken through to the third level of the spiritual god realm. They were even more powerful than when they were in the Saint Mansion's secret realm. This kind of heaven's favorite was truly terrifying. Not only was his combat strength shocking, but his cultivation speed was also terrifyingly fast. Boom! 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 The two of them exchanged over a dozen moves in a row, and the entire world seemed to be trembling. So strong! The second-grade heaven's favorites were shocked when they saw this. Was this the strength of a young big shot? He was too strong. How could they compete with him? Bald donkeys of Western Desert. Let's see if you have made any progress in your strength after not making a move for a while. Nanming, the young man covered in black flames, stared at the monk and the female bodhisattva. Little fire dog. This little monk will grant you your wish. The heartless monk stepped forward with a dignified expression. His entire body was covered in golden light as he struck out a golden palm towards the young man who was covered in black flames. The black flames on the young man's body started to burn. It was extremely terrifying, as if it was the flames from hell. Boom! Boom! The unscrupulous monk and the young man with black flames exchanged a few blows. The flames and golden light split the world into two, and the people around them retreated far away. Fortunately, the platform was large enough and sturdy. Otherwise, the others would not have a place to stand. The commotion caused by the battle between the two of them was no less than that caused by Yongpatian and Tuoba Shur. Amitabha. The female bodhisattva of the western desert chanted the name of Buddha, and the light of Buddha filled the air as she stepped out. With every step she took, a golden lotus would appear under her feet. It was holy and beautiful. Her target was Dark Child. The western desert and the southern nether had been enemies since ancient times. One was Buddha, the other evil. The heavens' favorites from the two territories had known each other for a long time and had fought many times in the past. Now that they met here, they would naturally fight each other. Without a doubt, Dark Child and the female bodhisattva were also powerful figures. The battle between the two was extremely shocking. Chapter 1122. 1122 Chapter 1122 Looking for Abuse. As soon as the competition began, the supreme geniuses of the western desert and southern underworld began to fight each other, while Yongpatian and Tuoba Shur fought. Oh, the six heavens' favorites were fighting intensely, but no one else moved. Long Chan stood there calmly, his face calm and his aura calm. He didn't look like anything special, but since everyone had taken the initiative to keep a distance from him, no one would go up and attack him. The heavens' favorites of the big shot level were still Lion Capital and Kong Lin. The two of them scanned the second-grade heavens' favorites with cold eyes. This was especially so for Shurdu. His cold eyes were filled with killing intent as he swept his gaze across Lu Ming from time to time. The remaining second-grade heavens' favorites were all on guard against each other, pulling apart the distance. Brother Lion, Brother Kong, I have a suggestion. Why don't we join forces and take down all these people? Then, there will only be 10 of us left on the field. Wu Changkong suggested as he walked toward the Lion City. Then he swept his gaze across all the second-grade geniuses, including Lu Ming. The second-grade heavens' favorites expressions changed. There were 9 heavens' favorites at the top level. Including Wu Changkong, there were 10 of them. Wu Changkong's intention was obvious. He would sweep everyone off the platform and secure a spot in the top 10. Shurdu's and Kong Lin's gazes flickered, and they also swept across everyone. All right, we'll do as you say, Shurdu said. The Lion Tiger Hall had a good relationship with the Heavenly Sword faction, and the Lion City had a good relationship with Wu Changkong. That was why he agreed to Wu Changkong's suggestion. There was also another reason. It was also beneficial for them to have 10 people left on the field earlier. The heavens' favorites of the big shots would definitely start a competition. However, if they fought now and one of them was defeated, wouldn't they fall out of the top 10 and be taken advantage of by the second-grade heavens' favorites? If they were able to secure a spot in the top 10, they would be able to fight to their heart's content. Even if they were defeated, they could still enter the ancient hall to comprehend. Kong Lin clearly thought of this point too. His gaze flickered and he said, I also agree. All right, Kong Lin. Then let's join forces first and clear up these trash. Shurdu sneered, his eyes cold. The second-grade heavens' favorites all had ugly expressions. Wu Changkong, you're despicable. Damn it. Everyone, I suggest that we join forces. Otherwise, we will all be defeated. All right, I agree. Let's join forces. A few second-class heavens' favorites spoke one after another. With a flash, 6 second-class heavens' favorites gathered together. They planned to fight Shurdu, Kong Lin, and Wu Changkong together. However, Goddess Tanxiang and Jing Kongling didn't go with them. The two peerless goddesses gathered together and retreated to the side. In addition, the Emperor God didn't join them. He moved back in a flash. Of course, it was impossible for Lu Ming to gather with them. You guys, why aren't you coming over? Do you want to be defeated by them one by one? A young man glanced at Di Shun and Lu Ming and shouted coldly. I don't need you to worry about me. Lu Ming smiled faintly. You're so stubborn. You think you have some strength and you're so proud. Let's see how you lose. The young man berated Lu Ming. He was rather unhappy that Lu Ming did not join them. Do it. Sherdu spoke and stared at Lu Ming first. Brother Lion, you don't need to attack this guy. I'll take him down. Wu Changkong said, his eyes fixed on Lu Ming. Good. The sage emperor just said that we can't kill him, but that's only what we can't do. You know what to do, right? Sherdu pondered for a moment and nodded. Don't worry, I'll break all his limbs and bones. I'll make sure he won't be able to get out of bed for half a year. Wu Changkong smiled hideously. Now that he had broken through to the second level of the spiritual god realm, his combat strength had greatly increased. He was full of confidence and did not take Lu Ming seriously at all. Bang! Bang! He took a few steps forward and the sword chi around him whistled as he approached Lu Ming. How dare you hurt the hero of my heavenly sword faction? I'll let you know the consequences. Wu Changkong's voice was cold. His eyes were sharp like swords. Scumbag of the heavenly sword faction, it seems that you have not learned your lesson. This time, I will make sure you learn your lesson. Lu Ming's eyes glinted coldly. He took a step forward and threw a palm at Wu Changkong. Buzz! The sword chi let out a long cry. Wu Changkong unsheathed his sword and the sharp sword chi slashed towards Lu Ming. His cultivation had broken through to the second level of the spiritual god realm, and his combat strength was much stronger than when he was in the Saint Mansion's secret realm. The sword chi cut through the void and slashed toward Lu Ming. Boom! Lu Ming's palm struck Wu Changkong's sword chi and destroyed it. At the same time he continued to attack. Clang! The palm landed on the sword and a loud boom was heard. The sword kept shaking. Wu Changkong felt as if he had been hit by an ancient mountain. He felt a terrible force surging toward him, forcing him to retreat. How is that possible? Wu Changkong roared. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He was actually forced back by Lu Ming's palm. He was already at the top among the second-grade prodigies. Now he was ahead of the other second-grade prodigies and was the first to enter the second level of the spiritual god realm. His combat strength was so strong that he was almost unrivaled under the big shots. However, he was forced back by Lu Ming's palm. This was unacceptable to him. The surrounding spectators were also shocked. The bearded commander's combat power was beyond expectations. Could he really rival or even defeat Wu Changkong? Boom! Boom! At this time, Sherdu and Kong Lin had already made their move. The two of them displayed terrifying combat power and launched a storm of attacks on those 6 second-grade Heaven's favorites. Although the 6 second-grade Heaven's favorites tried their best to defend, they were still at a disadvantage. This showed how powerful a Heaven's favorite is. Thump! Lu Ming took a step forward and the entire platform rumbled. His essential core surged and he used the prison-suppressing Heaven technique. His every move contained terrifying power. He appeared in front of Wu Changkong in an instant. He turned his palm into a fist and threw a few punches. The punch carried boundless power. The sky shook and groaned as if it could not withstand Lu Ming's punch. How can he be so strong? Wu Changkong was terrified. He exerted all his strength and slashed out shocking sword chi continuously. However, all of them were suppressed and crushed by Lu Ming's fist. Lu Ming's momentum was unstoppable. Wu Changkong kept retreating. His body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Burst! Burst! As Wu Changkong retreated, he activated his bloodline power and transformed into a sword. However, it was useless. Lu Ming's fist was too brutal and suppressed everything. Clang! 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 After 7 punches, Wu Changkong's sword exploded. His body reappeared, spitting blood and looking pale. He had lost. Wu Changkong had lost. This result was beyond the expectations of many people. Although Lu Ming had defeated Wu Tsong previously, Wu Tsong was considered weak among the second-grade geniuses. Wu Changkong, on the other hand, was a top second-grade genius and had already broken through to the second level of the spiritual god realm. His combat strength was much stronger than Wu Tsong's. In the beginning, no one thought that Lu Ming could be a match for Wu Changkong. This commander of the law enforcement army is really unexpected. Some of the older generation sighed. As for Tai Xing and the others, the corners of their mouths twitched, and they were already numb. Chapter 1123. 1123 Fighting against the geniuses of the big shots. Pa! Oh! Lu Ming rushed over and slapped Wu Chengkong's face. Arg! Wu Chengkong screamed and smashed his body on the platform. His head hit the platform like an iron hammer. Wu Chengkong's head was buzzing. He was completely dumbfounded. Gotcha! Then a heart-piercing pain came from his left leg, which woke him up. My leg! He screamed. Lu Ming stepped on one of his legs, completely breaking the bones. Gotcha! Then Lu Ming stepped on his right leg and broke it. Wu Chengkong screamed and broke out in a cold sweat. What are you shouting for? Didn't you just say that you were going to break my limbs and all my bones? Since that's the case, why don't you try it yourself? Break! Lu Ming shouted. A long spear was condensed in his hand. He swept it across Wu Chengkong's arms, breaking the bones in his arms. This was not an ordinary breaking of bones. It contained Lu Ming's terrifying vital essence. The vibration of the vital essence shattered the bones in Wu Chengkong's entire arm. Even with Wu Chengkong's powerful cultivation and physical strength, he would need at least a few months to recover. In the stands, the higher-ups of the Heavenly Martial Sword School had unsightly expressions on their faces. Some people could not wait to rush forward and cut Lu Ming into 8 pieces. However, in such an occasion they could only endure it. That's fucking unpleasant to hear. It's like a pig being slaughtered. Get lost. Finally, Lu Ming gave Wu Chengkong a kick, sending him flying off the platform. Of course, the last kick had shattered Wu Chengkong's bones. It would take him at least half a year to recover. Geniuses fought against each other. Wu Chengkong would probably be caught up or even surpassed by other geniuses in the same realm within half a year. A disciple of the Sky Martial Sword faction flew out and caught Wu Chengkong. He was carried to the stands, and an elder of the Sky Martial Sword faction fed him a healing pill. That little thief is so ruthless. The elder of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction gritted his teeth in hatred. Lu Ming was too ruthless. He had really shattered Wu Chengkong's bones and armor. Not a single piece was intact. It was really difficult to recover in a short time. At this moment, the battle on the platform was even more intense. Lu Ming had defeated Wu Chengkong, and Shurdu and Kong Lin were about to win. One of the 6 second-grade Heaven's favorites had already been knocked off the platform. That good for nothing. You're courting death. Shurdu shouted when he saw Wu Chengkong being defeated. Then, he howled and his body glowed with golden light. The next moment, Shurdu transformed into his true form. It was a golden lion that was 5 meters tall and more than 10 meters long. It was covered in golden fur, and there were even golden flames dancing on its fur. The Sun Divine Lion. The lion capital possessed 90% of the Sun Divine Lion's bloodline, and was on the verge of becoming a pure-blooded Sun Divine Lion. As long as he could break through to the Emperor realm and undergo a transformation, he would become a true Sun Divine Lion. Roar! Even the lion roared loudly. He was even more terrifying in his true form. His roar shook the world and the clouds in the sky were scattered. The huge claw slapped out and a second-grade Heaven's favorite was sent flying off the platform, blood spurting out of his mouth. The difference was too great and he was seriously injured in one move. The second-grade Heaven's Pride experts who were able to enter the top 20 were the strongest among the second-grade Heaven's Pride experts. However, they were still no match for Shurdu. Roar! Even the lion roared. Golden flames were boiling, and his combat strength was violent. He continued to burst out, and another 2 geniuses were sent flying. The remaining 2 were sent flying by Kong Lin's 2 slaps. The 6 second-grade Heaven's favorites were all defeated, including Wu Chengkong, who was kicked away by Lu Ming. There were a total of 7 people who were defeated. There were only 13 people left on the platform. As long as he could take down 3 more people, the top 10 would be born. Even the lion's cold gaze landed on Lu Ming first. On the other side, Kong Lin's gaze first swept across Goddess Tanxiang and Jing Kongling, then landed on the Emperor God. Lion capital, I'll take care of this Emperor God and you'll take care of Ming Lu. How about one for each of us? Kong Lin said. This is just what I want. Sure do said. And at this time, Kong Lin's gaze landed on Fairy Tanxiang and Jing Kongling again, and he said with a smile, Goddess Tanxiang, after we take care of the Divine Emperor and Ming Lu, there will only be 11 people left on the stage. At that time, Miss Kongling will have to go down. In this way you can also enter the top 10. Kong Lin was a suitor of Fairy Tanxiang. At this time, he naturally had to seize the opportunity to court her favor. Oh really? Was young Master Kong that confident? Don't be unable to do it, okay? Fairy Tanxiang narrowed her eyes and smiled. Ha ha ha, you can't do it? Other than the heaven's favorites of the big shots, no one can escape from my hands. Kong Lin smiled and moved suddenly. With a flash of 5-colored light, he pounced toward the Emperor God at a terrifying speed. Kong Lin's true form was a type of peacock. He had 90% of the bloodline of the 5 elements peacock, and his speed was unparalleled in the world. However, he had encountered an Emperor God. Spatial Intent, the King of Intents, was also skilled in speed. Whoosh! Whoosh! The Emperor God didn't fight with Kong Lin. Instead, he used Instant Step to avoid Kong Lin's attack. The two of them, one chasing and the other escaping, were both shockingly fast, constantly flashing on the platform. For a moment it was difficult to determine the winner. Second level of the spiritual God realm. The Emperor God has also broken through to the second level of the spiritual God realm. Someone exclaimed as he saw the cultivation of the Emperor God. There's finally a decent heaven's favorite in the East Continent. Although he's not as good as the big shots, he's one of the best among the second-grade heaven's favorites. Someone commented. The Emperor God had comprehended the space will, and his cultivation had broken through the second level of the spiritual God realm. He was already at the peak of the second-class heaven's favorites. Wu Chengkong might not be his match. Roar! The lion roared and pounced on Lu Ming. The golden claw radiance was like a golden heavenly blade that tore the space apart. Dragon power! With a single thought, the 7 dragon energies in his body instantly exploded. Lu Ming's body glowed with purple light. However, there were no scales on his body. Therefore, the masters of the Wang and Jiang families could not recognize him. The dragon power burst forth, and Lu Ming's strength was even more shocking. At the same time, a 5-colored will spread out as he threw a punch. At this moment everyone was shocked. This Minglu actually wants to fight against Lion City head-on. He's overestimating himself. That's right. His combat strength is indeed very strong, but there's still a big gap between him and the heaven's favorites. It's not wise to fight him head-on. Many people had thought that Lu Ming would learn from the Emperor God and use all his strength to dodge and stall for time. As long as the Western Desert and Southern Nether, or Yangpatian and Tuobashur had a winner, he would be able to enter the top 10. He had never expected that Lu Ming would choose to fight against Lion City head-on. Wasn't it courting death to fight against a powerful heaven's favorite head-on? 5-colored will. This person has comprehended 5 types of will. In the stands, the masters of the Wang and Jiang families were shocked. Previously, they had seen Lu Ming comprehend 4 types of concepts. That was the highest number of concepts that they had ever seen someone comprehend. However, they were surprised to see that someone had comprehended 5 concepts. They did not think of Lu Ming as the better option. First, they had clearly seen Lu Ming outside the Talisman Amulet sect. It was impossible for him to be in the Central Continent. Secondly, Lu Ming had only comprehended 4 concepts during the Battle of Providence. At such a high cultivation level, it was impossible for him to continue to comprehend new concepts. It was too difficult. They could only sigh. Central Continent was indeed full of geniuses. There was actually someone who could comprehend 5 intents. Chapter 1124. 1124 Be my mount. Boom! Oh! Lu Ming's fist and the lion's golden claws collided heavily. Instantly, the five-colored light and the golden light burst out, forming a six-colored light pillar that shot into the sky. A terrifying blast of air spread out in all directions. Bang! Bang! The two figures retreated 100 meters away from each other and stood opposite each other. A draw. This move was a draw. This made many people dumbfounded. This Minglu could actually block Shirdu's move. Although he was forced back, he also forced Shirdu back. Wasn't he too strong? Could it be that Minglu was also a heaven's favorite of the big shots? Everyone's heart twitched. Since when were powerful beings so worthless? Shirdu himself was also very shocked, but this aroused his ferocity even more. Die! Arg! Shirdu roared as the golden flames on his body jumped dozens of meters high. The terrifying heat seemed to be able to melt everything. It twisted the space and even burned through it, revealing a dark space. His aura also became more violent and shocking. In his body, the sun god lion's bloodline started to boil as if it was about to turn into a golden sun. The peak of the second level of the spiritual god realm. Shirdu's cultivation was at the peak of the second level of the spiritual god realm. Minglu were both at the second level of the spiritual god realm. I'll let you understand the difference between us, Shirdu said coldly, looking at Lu Ming with an extremely cold gaze. The cultivation that Lu Ming had just revealed was at the second level of the spiritual god realm. Who said that my cultivation is at the second level of the spiritual god realm? Lu Ming smiled faintly. The next moment, boom! A violent aura burst out from Lu Ming's body and spread in all directions. Third level of the spiritual god realm. At this moment, the cultivation that Lu Ming revealed was at the third level of the spiritual god realm. What? This Minglu's cultivation is at the third level of the spiritual god realm. How is that possible? Whoa, he's too strong. This guy has been hiding his strength all this time. This is too abnormal. Lu Ming's cultivation erupted, causing an uproar in the surroundings. Lu Ming's cultivation had actually reached the terrifying third level of the spiritual god realm. When he tested his bone age earlier, he was clearly not even 25 years old. To rush to the third level of the spiritual god realm before the age of 25 was too shocking and terrifying. Even the sovereigns in the stands were shocked. Saint Emperor, I didn't think that the imperial family would have such a talented genius hidden within. I really admire him. One of the emperors spoke. Xie Qitian's eyes were filled with surprise. There was actually such a heaven's favorite in the law enforcement army, and he had not noticed it before. As for the eighth prince Xiezhan, his eyes were filled with disbelief. He had never dreamed that this Minglu, who had been demoted to a lowly ant in the law enforcement army, was actually so terrifying. If this person had wanted to kill him before, he would have been dead long ago. In the crowd, Shizheng and Shifeng, whose cultivation had been crippled, were pale. Lu Ming's outburst of cultivation shocked the other talents on the platform. Yang Patian, Tuoba Shi, Mingzi, and the other paragons who were in the middle of a battle felt Lu Ming's powerful aura and their eyes turned grave. As for Lion City himself, he was even more shocked. Third level of the spiritual god realm? How is that possible? Even the lion roared. Lion Capital, I heard that you're ranked 5th among the 5 giants of the central continent. Although you're a little lacking, your looks aren't bad. You're about the same as my little gold. I'll force myself to take you as my mount. Lu Ming stepped forward, his aura was wild. The little gold he was talking about was King Kong, the golden tiger that Lu Ming had taken down in the Battle of Providence. Everyone was shocked. This awesome commander actually wanted to take Liandu as his mount? It was simply whimsical, arrogant, and ignorant. You're courting death. Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because your cultivation has reached the third level of the spiritual god realm. The lion was furious and his lungs were about to explode. Lion City was destined to become an emperor in the future. This big bearded man actually wanted to take him as a mount. He deserved to die. So what if they were at the third level of the spiritual god realm? It was common for Lion City to fight those of a higher realm. The sun god lion's blood boiled. It was as if the lion had completely transformed into a golden sun, pressing down on Lu Ming. Boom! The true essence of the third level of the spiritual god realm in his body boiled and gushed out like a tsunami. He activated the prison-suppressing heaven technique, and with the support of his intent and dragon power, he blasted toward the golden sun. With an earth-shattering explosion, everyone was shocked to find that the golden sun had been sent flying. However, Lu Ming's body only swayed a little. Kill! Then Lu Ming shouted and rushed toward Lion City, launching a storm of attacks. The lion roared, shaking the sky and the space around it. Blood Rascal also knew the sound wave technique, but compared to Lion City, he was not even worthy to carry his shoes. Lu Ming punched out with both fists continuously, breaking Shi Diyu's sound wave technique. The force of his punches landed heavily on Shi Diyu's body. Thump! Thump! The Lion City's body was as hard as diamond, and it emitted a terrifying heat. However, under Lu Ming's fist, it was still wailing in pain. The crowd gasped. The Lion capital was actually at a disadvantage. I forgot to tell you that I've never been defeated in a battle of the same level. Not to mention that you're one level lower than me. Lu Ming's voice was full of confidence. On the side of the platform, the eyes of Goddess Tanxiang and Jing Kongling flickered. Why do I feel that this style is very familiar? Fairy Tanxiang muttered. I also find it familiar. There's a kind of invincible confidence just like Lu Shaoqing's. The pure spatial spirit said. Lu Shaoqing seems to be very good at disguising himself. Could this person be Lu Shaoqing? Fairy Tanxiang seemed to have thought of something as she covered her mouth and whispered. Jing Kongling didn't say anything and just looked at the battle. The sun is endless. The lion was suppressed by Lu Ming and felt extremely aggrieved. It roared madly, displaying its terrifying strength to the fullest. It had to be said that the lion capital was indeed very strong. They possessed 90% of the divine sun lion's bloodline, which was equivalent to a human martial artist awakening a 9th-level divine-level bloodline. Their battle prowess was extremely terrifying, and killing enemies who were several levels above them was as easy as eating and drinking. If it were an ordinary peak 2nd-level spiritual god realm martial artist or demonic beast, Lu Ming could kill them with a single slap. However, Lu Ming's burst of 3rd-level spiritual god realm vital essence, in addition to the 7 streams of dragon energy and the support of the concept, could only gain the upper hand. It would take some effort to defeat him. Lu Ming was shocked. It was so powerful with only 90% of the divine beast's bloodline. How terrifying would it be if a pure-blooded divine beast came? A 90% bloodline and a pure-blood divine beast were fundamentally different. The difference was huge. According to the ancient legends, there had once been a pure-blooded divine beast in the divine wilderness continent. A natural divine beast was invincible the moment it was born. No one in its generation was its match, and it could overpower its opponents. Even if he was a supreme talent who had awakened a 9th-level divine bloodline, he was still far from being a match for him and would be suppressed. It was said that a pure-blood divine beast would be able to step into the Emperor realm with just a little bit of cultivation. Its talent was simply too strong. However, in the divine wilderness continent, it had been many years since a natural-born pure-blooded divine beast was seen. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.